Jane does not remember a time without them, the ghosts. They are everywhere if you know where to look, at street corners, in reflections, through the crack of her bedroom door. But Jane has always been the only one who sees them. As she grew older, it became clear that no one else noticed their presence, no one but her. As a child, she'd point them out, asking who they were or why they lingered. The adults would exchange glances and say she was playing games. Eventually, though, they grew tired of her games. Maybe that's why Jane never got adopted. The ghosts, the orphanage assumed something was wrong with her. And in some ways, she knows they were right. It's hard to hold down a job with ghosts constantly around. It's hard to walk dogs when a headless specter screams for your help. The thing is, Jane feels sorry for them. They're lonely, like her. What she never expected was to be jealous of one. But then again, she never expected to fall in love with a man still married to a ghost. November 1989. Not a single taxi driver ever wanted to drive Jane to the house. To be fair, there hadn't been many taxi drivers at the station anyway, 2 at most, and that third guy hadn't seemed very legit. Still, they'd all refused her when she'd mentioned she wanted to go to Hawthorne Hall. Why even go there? One of the drivers had lamented. The place is cursed. Surrounded by haunted woods, another had exclaimed. The ones who go there never come back. That hadn't sounded very promising. But unfortunately for Jane, her last living relative worked at Hawthorne Hall, and she'd been saving all she could for a long time to track him down. No amount of haunted woods was going to stop her from finding her family, and no lack of taxis either. A good 3-hour walk lay ahead, but Jane's pack was light, and the weather wasn't too terrible for late October in the north. The wind was cold, yes, but there had been no snow yet. She entered the woods easily enough, following the main road. Things had become muddier since then. The leaf-covered ground beneath her boots sank under her feet, her steps no longer crunching but squelching. The ground clung to her boots as though the earth itself wanted to hold her back. Her progress became slow, the light steadily declining in the sky with each passing hour. The sun sank lower, casting long, dim streaks of orange through the canopy. But even that glow felt distant, cold, as though the warmth of daylight could not penetrate these woods. Jane's fingers had long since grown numb from the chill, her breath visible in the cooling air. Would she need to camp in the woods tonight before she could reach her uncle's house? What a grim prospect that was. Branches twisted around her like skeletal arms, and the mist made it so she couldn't help but hit them in her path. But what choice did she have? Jane found the nearest clearing and started building a fire. She didn't have much food left on her, but she did have. Water splashed around her, and it would have to do. Tomorrow she'd reach Hawthorne Hall, a place of safety, despite what the cab drivers had muttered under their breath. Waiting for Jane on the front steps would be Uncle Bill, his arms stretched wide in welcome. She had never seen him before in her life, but in her mind, his eyes were kind. He's waiting for me, she thought. He'd be glad she came, even though he'd never answered any of her letters. He was her only remaining family, after all. Jane had been left at the orphanage at 4 years old, and he'd never once come to see her. The headmistress had thrown Jane out the moment she turned 18. Yes, Jane couldn't seem to hold down a job, but this time it would be different. This time she'd be allowed to stay. This time Jane would find work she could keep. And this time, she wouldn't let her ability ruin everything. No more telling anyone what she could do. No more whispers about Jane's strange knack for hearing things others couldn't. A ruffling sound nearby made Jane freeze, her meager sandwich hovering halfway to her lips. There was something there, lurking just beyond the edge of sight. Squinting into the shadows, she held her breath. The rustling came again, louder now, and then a pair of gleaming eyes appeared among the bushes. Her entire body tensed as the creature stepped forward, its movements cautious but deliberate. Another step brought it into the light. Jane exhaled deeply, relief flooding through her. It was only a wolf pup, two bright eyes blinking up at her innocently. Elsewhere, a man pushed open the door to his home, his long coat trailing behind him like a weighted shadow. The clock struck nearly 6 in the evening. The night is already pitch black outside, and the faint candles lighting the entrance hall do little to warm the place. "Are we out of power again?" Reese asks M. Teal, his house attendant, as she appears on his left. She's a woman in her mid-60s, short but with strong shoulders, someone he's practically known since birth. Her mate had been his father's beta when Reese was just a child. "Why would I light candles if we still had power?" the woman snaps, making Reese smirk. She helps him out of his coat with her usual efficiency. "We weren't expecting you home so soon, Alpha," she comments, her tone neutral. "How's everyone down in the valley?" "Snow's gonna start falling tomorrow," Reese replies, removing his scarf. "We had to move a few families to the pack house. Didn't want them stuck with humans around during the blizzard, especially those with children." By the time he'd left earlier, not everyone had been transported, and his beta, John, was still managing the entire move. If it had been up to him, Reese would have stayed and remained at the pack house with the rest of his people for the duration of the snowstorm, but he didn't have a choice anymore. "Where are the kids?" he asks, glancing around. He stares briefly at the large staircase that climbs behind him up the dark stone walls. Not a sound can be heard, no little footsteps rushing toward him. Of course, they wouldn't come to greet him. "In the drawing room upstairs," Miss Teal replies with a wave. "If you'd like to go and greet them, I'll get started on dinner." Reese nods curtly, heading for the staircase, which curves upward into the cold, suffocating embrace of the second floor. Candles scattered along the hallway flicker like faint beacons, barely illuminating his path, which seems to disappear into the dark. This house had been beautiful once, grand even, but now the air clings to him, as does the thick, oppressive silence. There's no trace of warmth to be found, only shadows and regrets filling corners where the light dares not go. The mansion feels like it grips his shoulders, dragging him down, whispering things in his ears he'd rather forget. Outside, the wind howls through a dance of dead leaves. "Sophie," Reese calls, pushing open the door to the drawing room. He sees her bent over a low table, pencil in hand. Her long, light blonde hair falls like a curtain, covering most of her small face. The rest is hidden under an oversized sweater. Her head snaps up to meet his gaze, and she smiles. "Daddy!" In an instant, Sophie's arms are wrapped around his leg, her speed seemingly increased while Reese was away. Her face is buried into his leg, holding on as if afraid he'll leave again. Reese had been gone for a while. He supposes guilt twisting in his heart, perhaps even longer in the eyes of a young child. Sophie is only 5 after all, and time flows differently at that age. "Where's your brother?" he asks distractedly, patting her head. One look around the room tells him all he needs to know, and one brief, angelic glance confirms it. Sophie confirms it. Sophie Reyes places his hands on her shoulders. "Where's Marcus?" The girl shrugs sheepishly, her eyes drifting toward the window, looking outside onto the grounds. "Damn it," Reese mutters. "3," Jane yells, trailing after the wolf. She probably wouldn't have followed it. She'd never heard of a pup of any kind wandering too far from its mother. She wasn't inclined to run into an angry grown wolf, but the pup had stolen her bag, which it now held firmly between its fangs as it dragged it away. Jane didn't possess much. Anything, really, save for this bag. So after the small wolf, she ran. Well, ran if one could call stumbling around in the mud running. The mist was thick now. One could barely see anything further than their nose, and it was damp, eerily cold. Jane focused on a sound specifically, the one of her pack being dragged to guide her along the path. "There's nothing left to eat in there," she yells uselessly. She shouldn't have given that wolf half her sandwich. Of course he'd want more, and the pack probably still smelled of peanut butter. But she'd felt so alone, and the wolf had looked so small. Small, but alert. It had carefully observed her until the next thing she knew, Jane was spilling out her life story. She'd done so while extending out her hand and purposely looking away, hoping the wolf would feel confident enough to approach. It was how she'd used to bond with stray dogs when she worked at the animal shelter. She'd worked there 6 months, a record. "You better not be leading me back to your parents," Jane called out again. "They'd probably eat me. You don't want me to get eaten, do you? I thought we were friends." It's a miracle Jane's lamp torch hasn't run out of batteries. If not, she probably wouldn't have seen the tall iron gate emerge from the mist. It stretches upwards, disappearing into the low-hanging fog. Beyond it, just barely visible through the haze, a flickering light, weak and distant, illuminated the silhouette of a massive building, a mansion. The wolf howls. It's standing to Jane's right, in front of a small cabin nestled against the forest edge. Jane wouldn't have seen it without the pup. It's dropped her pack at the door, on the front porch, and now its golden eyes meet Jane's. "What, do you want me to knock?" she asks, out of breath. Above her, the sky opens up, rain falling in sudden heavy droplets, hitting her head just as the door creaks open, revealing a man, thick and broad. His wide silhouette fills the entire doorway. "The heck are you?" the man asks, taking a step outside towards Jane. Then his eyes fall onto the wolf, and his jaw clenches. "Did he bite you?" he asks, and it takes a minute for Jane to realize he's speaking to her. She stammers, confused. "No, he didn't." The wolf whines, lowering its head. "Save it," the man growls, making Jane startle. "I didn't say anything." Jane blinks. The stranger looks away from the wolf, like he somehow just remembered her presence. There's something weary in his stance, like somehow Jane, making the large man in his late 50s visibly uncomfortable. "You better come inside," he grunts, opening his door a little wider. Jane hesitates. The rain is pouring now, soaking her coat, but she doesn't know this man. "I'm looking for someone," she replies hesitantly. "A distant relative. I've been told he lives here." "I'm Bill," the man snaps, stepping aside. "Come on inside, Jane. You as well," he adds, gesturing to the wolf. Then he steps back into his cabin, disappearing behind its walls. Jane glances between the tall, imposing man, her supposed great-uncle, and the wolf. The animal stands watchful, its low growl directed at the fire Bill just started. "I know, I'm sorry," Bill mutters, not unkindly, "but our guest is cold. I'll make you a warm drink." He locks eyes with Jane, his tone gruff yet somehow calming. There's something about him that puts her at ease, perhaps the faint sense of family connection. "How did you know who I was?" she asks, feeling herself relax as the sweet, warm scent of melted chocolate begins to fill the room. Between the fire crackling and the comforting aroma, Jane feels her body slowly warming, though her fingers remain icy. "You smell like—" Bill clears his throat, his gaze fixed on the heating milk. "You look like your mother." "I'd only met her once or twice, but I remember her." Jane wants to ask more about her mother, but holds back. Instead, she blurts out, "You've never answered my letters." Immediately, she regrets it. She's just met this man, barged into his home, and within 10 minutes, she's confronting him for not responding. I mean, you didn't have to answer me, she stammers, waving her hands nervously. You don't owe me anything. Bill clinks the steaming pot of milk with his wooden spoon. He doesn't seem nervous, but rather contemplative. I should have answered, he says eventually. I'm sorry. He sets 3 cups of cocoa on a tray and walks over to Jane, who offers a tentative smile. Perhaps you can't stay here, Jane, Bill says, his tone firm but not unkind. Her fingers twitch around her steaming cup. It smells delicious, but she's too nervous to drink. I wouldn't expect you to host me for free, she hurriedly explains, her cheeks flushing. I could work. I could help you. An uncomfortable grimace flashes across Bill's face. My alpha will not allow it, he says, his jaw clenched. Jane frowns, taking a sip from her cup. It's so good that she immediately takes a second and third before registering what Bill just said. You're what? She asks, confused. Bill gives the wolf a glance. The creature seems to be growing agitated, grunting softly in Bill's direction. My master will not allow it, Bill clarifies, his eyes lingering on the pup. He clinks his mug against Jane's. Go on, he encourages. It'll grow cold fast. Jane nods, gulping down the rest of her drink. The warm milk burns pleasantly down her throat. It's good, she says, setting the mug back down. Did you add spices to it? Bill smiles, though it's tight, still looking at the pup, who's now shuffling around and whining. Jane hears the command, go to my room. To her surprise, the pup immediately obeys, hurrying away. Can a wolf be taught to obey? She wasn't aware of that. How do you know this? A loud, embarrassing yawn escapes Jane's lips. The warmth of the fire is settling into her bones, making her feel drowsy. The hike she'd taken earlier through the woods must be taking its toll. How do you know this? Jane tries again, stifling another yawn. She can't help but snuggle a little deeper into the soft quilt Bill places around her shoulders. It's soft and warm, and Jane's eyelids are growing increasingly heavy. You look like you should rest, Jane hears her uncle say, though his voice sounds like it's echoing from miles away. She protests half-heartedly, her words feeling sluggish on her tongue. Perhaps she does need to rest her eyes for just a couple of seconds. Just a couple, or perhaps a few minutes. In the distance, Jane thinks she hears banging coming from the front door, but the next moment, she's asleep. Reese walks swiftly across the grounds, heading for Bill's cabin. With the rain pouring down, he's going to lose all traces of Marcus's scent if he doesn't hurry. Sophie is trotting beside him, her paws steady against the mud, though she growls lowly, clearly unhappy with the downpour soaking her fur. I told you to stay inside, Reese snaps at her, ignoring her protesting whines. Now's hardly the time to train. Sophie whines again, her thoughts clearly on her brother. They're rarely apart. Sophie always eagerly trails after Marcus, as all younger siblings do. At least the boy hadn't brought her along on this little outing, Reese muses, feeling a mix of appreciation and irritation. What could have compelled the kid to leave home at this hour, alone and for so long? Hopefully he's with Bill, the most dominant wolf around in Reese's absence. And if Marcus isn't there, at least Reese can ask Bill to help with the search. He knocks on the door once, loud enough to make a statement. Smoke escapes the chimney, a clear sign of a fire burning inside. Alpha Bill greets him, his eyes widening at the sight of Reese. He hadn't expected Reese to return so soon. Is he here? Reese asks, pushing his way inside, Sophie following close behind. Yes, but Bill waves a hand at Sophie. Kid, hold up. You're dripping all over my floor. Sophie ignores him, happily rushing toward the living room in the back. Just like Reese, she must have picked up on Marcus's scent. Good, her tracking skills are improving. Sophie is a much more talented tracker than Marcus, though girls often are. Reese follows Sophie into Bill's small, dimly lit living room. Warmth immediately hits him after the cold, wet walk outside. He exhales in relief, watching the fire wearily. Marcus is wrapped in a too large quilt, his bare feet sticking out from underneath. Sophie bounds over to him, tail wagging, as her brother sets his steaming cup of hot cocoa on the floor for her. His hair hangs in wet clumps around his flushed face. He avoids meeting Reese's eyes, choosing instead to ruffle Sophie's fur with a forced grin. "Where were you?" Reese steps forward, his voice quiet but firm. Marcus shrugs, pulling the quilt tighter around himself. Barely 8 years old and already acting like a rebellious teenager. Reese's jaw tightens, sensing the boy's defiance. Now isn't the time to push, not with the storm outside and whatever trouble Marcus has gotten into tonight. He's about to let it go when Marcus turns to Bill, his voice edged with accusation. "What did you give her?" Reese frowns. There's a faint, unfamiliar scent beneath the wood smoke, something out of place. "Well, I couldn't let her see you shift back, could I, boy?" Bill grunts, a layer of guilt in his voice. Reese's frown deepens as he glances around the room. His gaze finally lands on a large armchair facing the fire. His steps are slow as he walks past Marcus toward it. Then, upon seeing what's hidden there, he growls. Nestled in the chair is a young woman, buried beneath a quilt, fast asleep. Her light brown hair clings to her face in damp, tousled strands. The firelight casts soft shadows over her pale features. "What is this?" Reese growls, pointing accusingly at the small human. She remains oblivious as he snaps his fingers in front of her face, her breathing slow and steady. "I sedated her," Bill explains with an awkward grimace. "Marcus needed to shift back. I couldn't think of anything else." Reese ignores him, staring at the fragile figure, delicate bones and pale skin. A human? What had Bill been thinking, letting her come here? "She's a relative of mine," Bill quickly explains. "She wrote to me a few times. She has nowhere to go." "Get rid of her," Reese interrupts, irritation lacing his words. He wouldn't have a human near his house or his children. Marcus could have encountered her in his wolf form. A shifter's bite almost always killed humans. But Alpha Bill's face pales. "She's gone by morning," Reese barks, lifting Sophie under one arm and Marcus under the other. He drags the children away from the fire's warmth, kicking and screaming. Outside, there's only blackness and rain. He doesn't care about the dark. He's grown used to it. He just doesn't need any more complications. The light is already high in the sky when Jane emerges from her slumber, mouth dry and wondering where she is. Her eyes briefly roam the room, vaguely recognizing the large stone chimney next to her, before settling on her uncle. He's seated at the dining table, drumming his fingers. "Coffee?" he offers, pouring her a cup before she can even reply. "I made you eggs, too." She hasn't even properly sat down when she's being offered the biggest breakfast serving of her life: eggs, bacon, and a literal pile of bread. "You'll need your strength if you want to get to the bus stop on time," Bill tells her, filling up her plate. "It's cold out there." Jane puts a smile on her face as she nods. She's already outstayed her welcome, and she hasn't even been here a day. "It's going to snow today," Bill adds. "You'll need to leave right after you're done." "Done eating," her uncle adds, in case his previous dismissal hadn't been clear. Jane nods, cutting away a piece of bacon. "I understand," she says, and she does because she doesn't know this man, and he doesn't owe her anything. "I'm sorry," Bill mumbles, eyes cast down. "I wish I—" "It's fine," Jane interrupts with a shrug. "Really, you don't have to explain." But Bill shuffles uncomfortably. "These lands belong to my master." He clears his throat. "It's not up to me, you understand." Jane takes a peek through the window. The mist has cleared, and for the first time, she can see the mansion fully, looming behind the iron gate. The building is tall and imposing, its dark gray stones weathered and worn. One of the wings on the western side looks particularly neglected. Parts of the stone appear scorched, crumbling away, as if the structure is barely holding itself together. She spots shattered windows and blackened beams, still visible even after years of decay. "Is this where your master lives?" she asks, curious, her gaze lingering on the crumbling section. "Yes," Bill mutters beside her, noticing where her eyes have settled. Jane frowns, a knot forming in her stomach. "Was there a fire?" she ventures, hesitant but drawn to the eerie sight of the damaged wing. Bill shifts, clearly uncomfortable. "Yes, a terrible accident," he says quietly. "What happened?" Jane presses, feeling a chill despite the morning sun. "No one here likes to talk about that cursed day," Bill replies. Jane pulls her gaze back to the mansion. It looks like it's trying to hold itself in place despite its crumbling facade, as if clinging to something long lost. Not even an hour later, she said her goodbyes, her pack full of extra food. "Make sure you hurry across the forest. There's a bus stop down east near the edge of the woods that will take you back to town," Uncle Bill had said. "But there are only 3 per day, and it won't run when it starts to snow." Jane had acquiesced, but now she wonders what she'll even do back in town. Where is she supposed to go? Now isn't the time to linger on these thoughts. Bill said it was going to start snowing soon. Jane walks along the iron gates surrounding the mansion, as instructed, her uncle having claimed she'd find a clear path through the woods if she followed it for a little bit. She eventually sees it ahead, a small trail disappearing into the thick bushes of the forest, and is about to follow it when she notices something, or rather someone. A little boy sits on the ground, staring into the horizon. He can't be more than 8 or 9, with golden blonde hair falling in loose curls around his face. Something about him seems familiar, though Jane is certain she's never seen him before. That barely seems to matter, though, when, despite the icy wind and freezing air, it occurs to Jane that the kid isn't wearing any clothes. "Oh my God!" she exclaims, removing her coat as she rushes forward. "Kid, are you okay?" The boy visibly tenses the closer she gets, sending her a quick glance before averting his eyes. His expression remains eerily calm, almost detached, as if he doesn't feel the cold, or perhaps as if he's used to it. Jane noticed his rigid posture, the clear sign that he wanted to flee but was frozen in place. Gently, she placed her coat around the boy's shoulders, rubbing his arms to warm him. Her hand stilled as she noticed it. On his right arm, a large, jagged burn mark stretched across the skin. It was old and healed, yet unmistakably severe. The sight of it made her pause for a beat. "You'll freeze out here," she murmured, her heart beating wildly as she scanned their surroundings for help that didn't seem to arrive. "Where are your parents?" The boy shrugged, then reluctantly raised his arm, pointing behind them. Jane turned to follow his gesture and saw it. The mansion, specifically the burnt west wing, its blackened stone and crumbling remains stark against the darkened sky. Her gaze drifted back to the boy's burn-marked arm, and she bit her lip to suppress a grimace. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy door, the boy clinging silently to her side. She tried knocking first, but when no reply came, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. The door creaked as it swung inward, revealing a vast entrance hall, elegant in a cold, detached way. High ceilings loomed above, intricate woodwork and stone columns supporting the cavernous space, but there was no warmth, no life. The air was stifling in its silence, unnaturally cold and biting at her skin as she stepped inside. Something felt wrong. Deep in her bones, Jane could feel it. Her eyes darted nervously around the room. "Is anyone here?" she called out, her voice swallowed by the oppressive stillness. Thin, pale light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows over the stone floor. Her heart thudded against her chest as she rubbed her arms, glancing down at the boy. His bare feet left small, muddy prints on the pristine floor. Before she could call out again, a booming voice cut through the silence, making her jump. "What are you doing here?" The sound sent a shiver straight down her spine. Jane spun around, her breath catching as she saw him descending the stairs. The man, or rather the force, coming toward her was tall, his powerful frame commanding every inch of the space as though he owned it. His face was sharp, handsome in an almost cruel way, and his eyes blazed with barely restrained anger. Trailing close behind him was the small frame of a woman dressed in black, her face awkwardly inclined to her right as she silently stepped forward. "I asked you a question," he repeated, his tone sharp enough to snap Jane's attention back to him. Stunning, she thought, but there was something about him, something dark that made her body tense in response. The woman's white, bony fingers settled on his shoulder as if trying to gain his attention. Reluctantly, Jane's eyes traveled up the woman's thin arm, the cold in the room becoming more suffocating than ever. Her breath caught in her throat as her gaze settled on the woman's lips, her grin. Wide, unnatural, it seemed to stretch endlessly, fixed and stagnant, wholly out of place on her face. It didn't belong there at all, and it made Jane's stomach twist with unease. Sick to her stomach, Jane tries to warn him, not daring to meet the woman's eyes. They'll be vacant and lifeless, she knows, and shouldn't be stared at for too long. Her bones curl more tightly around the man's shoulders. He doesn't seem to notice, and of course he wouldn't, for this woman isn't really here. She's dead. Jane realizes this, and apart from her, no one can tell she's even here at all. Sophie won't meet Reese's gaze. Her amber eyes flick away every time he tries to catch them. "Where's your brother?" He crouches down patiently, trying to coax her attention. But then sounds drift from downstairs, and he straightens, muscles tensing. His wolf is instantly alert. He's not expecting anyone, yet a stranger has entered their home. Without a word, he strides to the edge of the staircase, tension spreading through his body like wildfire as he descends. When he reaches the entrance, he freezes. Standing awkwardly beside Marcus is the human girl from the night before, the same girl he'd told Bill to send away. She looks just as human, just as unsuspecting as before. A rush of protectiveness surges inside him. The one glance at Marcus lets him know the boy is unharmed. Despite that, the cold seems to seep into Reese's skin, biting at him. It's too cold for a human. She can't stay here. Reese's eyes drift to a large window where snowflakes have begun to fall. His head throbs, a dull ache spreading through his temples as something cold curls around his ear, a whisper that rings inside his mind. "Don't let her near our children. She'll take them. Don't let her take them away." His jaw clenches, eyes flickering between Marcus and the girl, dread curling in his gut. Take his children away, over his dead body. Without thinking, Reese storms down the rest of the stairs. "What are you doing here?" he barks. The young woman startles, her dark eyes snapping toward him, wide, expressive eyes with a quiet wonderment to them that instantly makes Reese feel sorry for yelling. But the pounding in his head is relentless, and when she keeps silent, her cheeks reddening, he repeats his question, his voice more controlled but still hard. She doesn't answer immediately. Instead, her eyes flick to something just over his shoulder, settling there. Frowning, he glances back instinctively but sees nothing. I found him outside," the girl stammers, pointing at Marcus. "He was naked. I thought—" Reese's jaw tightens, his focus shifting to Marcus for a moment, relieved that the boy is unharmed. But the whisper returns, curling against his ear, harsher now. "She'll take him away. Don't let her take our son." Reese's body tenses, his protective instincts flaring dangerously. "Thank you for bringing him back," he says curtly, his voice rough, "but you need to leave." The girl hesitates, uncertainty written on her face. "I don't think it's safe for him to be wandering outside, especially undressed as he was." Her words grate on his nerves, striking deeper than they should. His head pounds, icy dread seeping into his veins. "Is he your son?" she asks softly. "I think not," he snarls, barely holding back the growl threatening to break free. Anger flared in his chest. "I said leave," Reese barked, his wolf urging him forward. The girl flinched, her fists clenching at her sides, yet still she wouldn't look at him. Her wide, teary eyes remained fixed on something over his shoulder. "Sir?" she tried, her voice shaky. "Leave!" he snapped again, the sense of wrongness in the room thickening as the girl turned and fled. Her figure disappeared into the cold mist outside, but the chill lingered long after she was gone. Jane's feet pounded against the muddy earth, the weight of her backpack barely registering. Fear coiled tightly in her stomach, twisting like a living thing as she ran blindly through the steadily falling snow. That woman, that ghost, its stiff, sickening grin stretched impossibly wide. Jane shuddered at the memory of those bony fingers clinging to the man's shoulder. Her spine prickled with unease. She'd never seen a ghost so clearly before, never for so long. How long had it been lurking there by his side? And what exactly had it been whispering to that man, Marcus's father? Jane could see it, but couldn't hear it. Marcus, that little boy, had been outside naked in the cold. Was that the ghost's doing? Could it harm him? Could she just leave him there? No, she decided. She had to get help. Her legs burned as she pushed through the snow, icy flakes swirling around her, blinding her. The bus. She needed to make it to the bus stop. It would take her to town, where she could find a phone, call social services, the police, anyone. But as the edge of the forest cleared, her eyes caught movement up ahead. The bus was already pulling away, too far for her to reach in time. Jane stumbled to a stop, panting, watching it disappear into the white haze. The snow stung her eyes, her cheeks burning from the cold. Only then did she realize she'd left her coat with Marcus. Her skin prickled painfully as the cold seeped into her body, but she shook it off, forcing herself to keep moving. She needed to find help. Someone would have to believe her. They'd just have to. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew how unlikely that was. No one ever believed her ghost stories. But the images returned. Bony hands, Marcus's bare feet in the freezing snow, the man's darkened eyes. Fear clawed at her insides, and Jane's pace quickened. She needed to fix this somehow. She wouldn't be able to live with herself otherwise. Her legs screamed as she forced herself forward, each step harder than the last. Her breath came in ragged gasps. each one stinging her throat with the sharp bite of winter air. The world around her dissolved into a haze of white. How long had she been running? The cold, once so sharp, began to dull, fading into a distant hum at the edge of her awareness. Her skin, which should have been stinging from the icy wind, started to feel warm. Jane blinked, slowing her steps, confusion settling in. The warmth spreads over her, crawling up her arms and legs, radiating from her chest. It feels wrong, yet pleasant at the same time, like slipping into a bath that's too hot after being out in the cold for too long. She tugs at the collar of her sweater, fingers trembling as the sensation intensifies. It's too warm now, suffocatingly so, like she's burning up from the inside. Her head feels foggy, the cold snow beneath her boots is forgotten. Her vision blurs around the edges, and she stumbles, her body heavy. The thought of stopping, of just lying down, becomes appealing. Her knees buckle, and she collapses onto the cold ground, cradling herself as if in a gentle embrace. Her limbs move sluggishly, carving faint lines in the snow. Her body feels weighed down, but there's an odd lightness in her mind, a soft euphoria. She giggles faintly, the sound lost to the wind. Her eyelids grow heavy as she stares up at the falling snowflakes, blinking lazily. Everything feels warm now, peaceful. Then, through the blur of snow, she sees them. Eyes piercing, beautiful, familiar. They hover just beyond the storm, watching her. A voice calls out, distant but steady. Jane blinks, her body no longer responding to her thoughts. The presence grows closer, comforting even as her consciousness fades. Strong arms pull her up, wrapping her in warmth, and she sinks into the feeling, safe and secure, just before everything goes black. Reese forces his way through the snow, his focus locked on the faint scent trail still lingering beneath the icy wind. He should have never let the human walk off into the storm. Humans were delicate, fragile beings. He knew that. Bill had come to him in a panic not long after his niece had left, pleading for Reese to go after her, claiming she'd never make it to the bus in time. Marcus had been there too, his scent sharp with fear, just like it had been that day. Images of the fire burst behind Reese's mind. He'd sworn to himself he'd never let Marcus be scared like that again. The guilt claws at him as he pushes harder through the snow. He'd also sworn he'd never let anyone get hurt in his stead, not again. There had been too many to count. So, of course, he'd taken the job of finding Jane. He was faster than Bill, better at tracking, and if anyone was going to risk the blizzard, it had to be him. He'd sent the girl into the storm, too focused on getting her out of his territory to think straight. Now her trail is fading fast. The snow is coming down thick. If he loses her scent, if he can't find her in time... Humans are fragile, he tells himself frantically, prone to freezing to death in weather like this. He picks up his pace, muscles burning as the cold digs deeper into his skin. He considers shifting. He'd be faster, more efficient in wolf form. But it might frighten her if he finds her like that, though it'd be better than her freezing to death. He's on the verge of doing it when a sound cuts through the wind. A faint, strange sound. A giggle, euphoric and delirious, reaches him. He sprints forward, gut twisting as his eyes scan the snow. Then he sees her, sprawled on the ground, half buried in the icy drifts. Her skin is pale, lips blue, and she's wearing only a t-shirt, her sweater discarded several feet behind her. In seconds, he drops to his knees beside her, scooping her limp body into his arms. Her skin feels like ice under his touch, and when he wraps her tightly in his coat, it barely makes a difference. She's unconscious, her heartbeat faint. Time is slipping away. Her pulse grows weaker with each passing second. The manor is too far. If he tries to make it back, she won't survive. There's only one option left, the old hunting cabin, long abandoned but closer. It's their best chance. Jane drifts in and out of consciousness, her mind floating between dreams and reality. The sound of crackling fire filters through her haze, accompanied by a warmth that feels almost impossibly lovely. Moving or even thinking feels impossible. When her eyes flutter open, her thoughts are slow and unfocused. She tries to lift her arm, but it's too heavy. Everything feels heavy. Something soft brushes against her skin, wrapping her in its warmth. She shifts slightly, turning her face, and catches her breath. Golden eyes stare back at her, gleaming softly in the firelight. A wolf. Its cold, damp nose brushes against hers, startling her for a moment before the image blurs. Blinking, she looks again, and the wolf is gone, replaced by a striking figure of a man. His features are strong, masculine, bathed in the glow of the fire. "It's okay," he tells her, voice calm and steady. "You're safe." His arms are wrapped securely around her, his warmth seeping into her skin, making her feel languid and secure. Why she's here or why he's holding her doesn't seem to matter. All that matters is this: the safety, the warmth, the comfort. Jane relaxes further into his embrace. "Don't be alarmed," he adds, his tone low and soothing, like velvet. Alarmed? Jane's lips twitch into a sleepy smile. Why would she be alarmed? She feels cherished, cradled in his arms. Her eyelids flutter as she struggles to keep them open, but it's a losing battle. A large hand brushes softly against her cheek, fingers trailing gently through her hair. The gesture fills her with contentment, pulling her deeper into drowsiness. "You're beautiful," she mumbles, her words slurred and barely audible. This has to be the best dream she's ever had. She never wants to wake up. The fire crackles softly, the world fading into oblivion. When Jane stirs again, she feels more grounded, aware. Memories of the wolf linger faintly, like a distant dream. The first thing she notices is the weight of quilts piled over her, heavy and warm. Her fingers move experimentally beneath the layers, testing their strength. Her hand moves sluggishly against the fabric, and she takes in a deep breath. The scent of burning wood fills her senses. Her eyes drift upward, taking in the high wooden ceilings that stretch above her. The space feels grand and rustic, old yet well kept, with thick wooden beams crossing overhead. Where am I? Jane's mind feels clearer now, the fog of her earlier confusion lifting slightly. The last thing she remembers is the snow, the cold biting at her skin, and then the warmth. The man. Before she can dwell on the memory of him any longer, a sound catches her attention. Light giggles, almost like whispers, float through the air. Jane frowns, her gaze sweeping the room, searching for the source. At the end of the bed, just barely visible over the edge of the mattress, she sees them. Two tiny blonde heads peeking out from under the covers, their crowns of curls barely visible. "Shut up, Sophie," a small voice mumbles. "You'll wake her." The giggles stop abruptly. "Do you think she'll be mad?" An even smaller, feminine voice counters. "Probably not," a boy replies, "but the alpha will." "Maybe when she wakes up, she can bake us cookies," the girl says, sounding hopeful. Jane smiles, amused. "I do have a great recipe," she chimes in, sitting up. Silence. Then, at once, Two small faces with round, surprised eyes emerge behind the edge of the bed. Jane instantly recognizes the boy as Marcus, though the girl, with long blonde curls, is someone she's never seen before. "You're awake," Marcus says, almost accusingly. "Cookies," his sister exclaims at the same time, sounding excited. "Hi," Jane greets the children with a smile. They both stare at her, a mix of curiosity and wariness in their expressions. Then Marcus steps in front of Sophie protectively, as if he aims to shield her from Jane. His small face twists into a scowl. "You're not to tell anybody we were here," he commands rather hotly. Jane finds it adorable how he squares his shoulders and sets his jaw like an adult would. "Cross my heart," she swears solemnly, making Marcus blink. "Really? Just like that?" he asks, surprised. Marcus's voice cuts off abruptly and his eyes go wide as he stills. Jane blinks at the sudden change in demeanor, her confusion deepening. "What's wrong?" she asks. He holds a finger to his lips, motioning for her to be quiet. "Someone's coming," he whispers, his body tense as he glances toward the door. Jane tilts her head, straining her ears, but she can't hear anything. Before she can reassure them, Marcus drags Sophie from the end of the bed, diving with her behind it as if their lives depended on it. And just in time. Standing at the door, Uncle Bill's concern melts into relief the moment his eyes land on her. "Jane," he breathes, stepping into the room. "Thank God you're awake." From behind the bed, Marcus pops his head up. "Oh, it's just Bill," he mutters, making Sophie grunt in annoyance. "I could have told you that," she says, crossing her arms. "I could sense him from miles away." Bill winces at her words, glancing briefly at Jane before clearing his throat. "All right, out you two," he says firmly. Bill shuts the door behind them and turns back to her, his expression softening as he comes to sit beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" he asks, his voice gentle, though there's an edge of guilt in his tone. Jane shifts slightly under the weight of the quilts. "I feel fine, I think," she says, looking around the unfamiliar room, trying to piece everything together. "Where am I?" "You're at my master's house, up at the mansion," Bill replies, sighing as he rubs a hand over his face. His eyes flicker with remorse. "I'm so sorry, Jane. I shouldn't have told you to leave when I knew the storm was coming." The memory of the snow flashes in her mind, cold, biting. "It's not your fault," she begins, but Bill shakes his head, cutting her off. "You almost died," he says, his voice tight. "You would have if my master hadn't found you in the snow." Jane frowns. Her uncle's master had gone after her, that same man who'd cast her out with anger in his eyes. It feels foggy, like a distant dream. She remembers the cold, the overwhelming exhaustion, and the warmth, a presence by her side. Had that been him? Surely not. A dream. "That's all. I don't remember much," she admits, flustered, because the glimpse of something both pleasant and surprising flashes through her mind. The feel of a strong masculine frame pressed against her own, the touch of muscular arms holding her close. Heat coils within her. It's blurry, but Jane remembers feeling safe and warm and so good. This must have been a dream. "Was your master angry?" she asks, biting her lip. For some reason, the thought doesn't sit very well with her. Bill shakes his head. "If anything, he felt sorry for putting you in danger. He's not unkind, you know, just a bit gruff." Jane thinks of the sound of his deep, rumbling voice against her ear, promising to keep her safe. A delightful shiver runs through her spine. Just a dream, she tells herself, feeling more than a little flustered now. Nothing more to it. "Are you all right?" Bill asks suddenly, looking a little uneasy. Jane gasps, cheeks flushed. "If you could just give me my clothes, I'll be on my way." The thought of running into that man after he'd kicked her out and then rescued her, only for Jane to be assailed with distracting, vivid thoughts of him, thought she has no place having, solely based on foolish, fevered dreams. She doesn't think she'll be able to look him in the eye. "You can't leave, Jane," Bill says. "We're snowed in." A silence befalls the room, her uncle's words taking a while to register. Snowed in. Jane blinks, feeling dumb. "The storm's gotten worse," Bill nods grimly. "The roads are blocked, and it could be days before it's clear enough to leave." Jane's heart sinks at the thought. Days. "A couple weeks at most," Bill adds. "But don't worry, you can stay here in the meantime. It's all been arranged with the boss. He's agreed to it." Weeks. Jane sinks back into the pillows, her mind racing. Reyes can still smell the girl on him. He's taken 3 showers already, resulting in him using cold water so as not to deplete their entire reserve. The faint but sweet and floral fragrance of hers still clings stubbornly to his skin. It's a distinct and pleasant scent for a human, one he thinks most of them don't possess, just a blend of sweat and cosmetic products. But Jane, he hadn't been able to smell her much at first. The tinge of smoke and burning wood from the fire he'd made in the cabin had dominated his senses. Yet, as she began to grow warm, slowly but surely coming back to life, he found himself enjoying it. Her scent soothed him, made him feel at peace, a strange sensation when he could barely remember what peace felt like anymore. Reyes paced the dining room as Miss Teal set the table. They would be stuck here a while, he thought, aggravated. Would the children behave around the human? They were already confined inside because of the snow, but with Jane here, they wouldn't even be able to shift. Neither would he, nor Bill, nor anyone else. Though it was different for adults, children had far more trouble controlling themselves. Reyes settled into his seat at the far end of the breakfast table. Eliza stared down from above the chimney near the end of the room, her deep blue eyes kind and indulgent in the painting. "What would you have done?" he asked her under his breath. Eliza had always been more patient than him, more joyful when they were kids, while Reyes sulked in a corner for one reason or another. She'd take his hand and drag him back into the sun. But there was no one left to drag him anywhere now. No more sun, no more warmth. And he might have lived with that if it weren't for the fact that his children deserved better. Better than this place, better than him. They deserved their mother. But Eliza was gone, replaced by a cold, aging portrait. Something cold wrapped around him. A gust of wind, perhaps. The windows were closed, yet outside the weather raged on. Heavy, blinding snow blowing thickly around the house. Reese's fingers twitched against the surface of the table. At the far edge of the ground, he could make out the outlines of the lake, frozen in ice. "We could go for a swim," Reese murmured to himself in a voice that didn't sound like his own. A feminine voice, distant yet familiar. "I miss you," it said. "Why do you insist on keeping us apart?" Reese shifted in his seat, pain growing behind his eyes. Not again, he thought distantly. He wanted it to stop. "I can make it better," the voice said, stronger now. "Please, come with me, my love. We could take the children." "No," Reese snapped, startling Miss Teal, who had returned unnoticed, plates in hand. She gave him a strange look. "Sir?" she asked cautiously. Reese grunted in reply, his gaze drifting back to the window. "Not the children," he repeated faintly. His migraine pounded, and a shiver ran down his spine. When he closed his eyes, he saw flames engulfing Eliza, heard her screams. Jane stood nearby, dressed in a light black dress and thin leggings she'd been lucky enough to find in a drawer. Shivers run down her spine as she descends the stairs, heart racing with nerves. The thought of facing him, the man who saved her, makes her pulse quicken far more than the cold air brushing against her skin. A flush creeps up her neck, and she scolds herself. He's already been kind enough to let Jane stay here. The least she can do is avoid embarrassing him with her foolish feelings. It's not even a crush. It's nothing, less than nothing. As she nears the dining room, she hears the children talking animatedly. Then Ariel speaks up. "I wish to become human." Sophie giggles while Marcus groans. "We were there. We've seen the film." Georgie hasn't, though. "It's Miss Teal, dear," a woman's voice interjects, making Jane freeze mid-step. The children's mother. Her stomach twists uncomfortably. She hadn't considered meeting the lady of the house, hadn't let herself think that far ahead. But of course, there would be a Mrs. Hawthorne. The sinking weight in her gut makes her feel naive. Forcing herself to breathe, she steps into the room. The children fall silent at the sight of her, eyes widening as she enters. She quickly drops her gaze, but not before noticing that the woman seated in the corner appears much older, too old to be their mother. Hesitating, Jane finally allows herself to glance toward the end of the table. Her heart thuds painfully in her chest. He's here. She knew he would be, but seeing his imposing form sprawled in a chair at the far end of the room makes her knees wobble slightly. "Mr. Hawthorne," Bill greets, inclining his head. Jane is feeling better. Her savior doesn't seem to hear Bill, his attention fixed on something outside. His profile is illuminated softly by the morning light, and what a profile it is. Before she can stop herself, Jane's eyes drink him in. The strong, noble line of his jaw, the way his dark blonde hair curls slightly above his ear, those sharp, defined cheekbones. He's even broader than she remembers. But as she takes in more of him, something else becomes clear. Tension radiates from his shoulders, and he looks tired, the lines of his face taut. Jane's fantasy falters as concern creeps in. "Dad?" Sophie asks timidly. Beside her, Marcus gives Jane an apologetic look for his father's dismissiveness. But Jane isn't offended because next to Mr. Hawthorne sits something. Long black hair covers most of its face, and it suddenly dawns on Jane that she's been an absolute fool. There's a lingering spirit in this house. How could she forget? Its neck remains bent at an odd angle, but when its eyes move, angling toward Jane, the ghost sneers. "Jane, have a seat," Bill says, startling her. The ghost is touching Mr. Hawthorne's face, its lips mouthing muted words Jane cannot hear, but that clearly affect him. He blinks, then his gaze locks onto hers, his expression hardening. "What the hell are you wearing?" he growls, more accusation than question. Jane blinks in surprise as his eyes roam over her form, and she feels exposed under his scrutiny. It's the moment she pales, realizing she should have asked before borrowing any clothes. "I apologize, sir," she begins, but he snaps out of his chair, body rigid and fists clenched. That isn't what makes Jane fall silent, though. It's the way the ghost is smirking, a cruel smirk that seems unnatural paired with its vacant eyes. Barely registering Mr. Hawthorne stomping her way, Jane feels sickened by the sight of the ghost. It's right there, looming, and she wants to scream, but the words won't escape her lips. It's no use. She's tried so many times before to tell others about them. She told her relatives, then the ladies at the orphanage when her relatives grew tired of her stories, and later her teachers at school. But no one ever believed her about the ghosts. Mr. Hawthorne won't either. "Take it off." A deep, gruff voice pulls her from her thoughts. The man towers over Jane, so pale he could pass for a ghost himself. "What?" Jane asks, noting the faint tremors running through his large frame. His eyes are blue, dark, and full of pain. Off, he barks. Behind him, everyone falls quiet, heads lowered. Sophie whines softly while Marcus looks like he wants to speak but can't. The ghost's grin remains wide, a gaping void that chills her to the bone. "All right," Jane mutters, meeting its gaze. "I'll take it off, I get it." Calmly, she moves slowly, gauging how the ghost reacts. It doesn't move, but when her dress falls to the ground, leaving Jane in only a bra and leggings, Mr. Hawthorne does. He gapes, looking lost, then grabs onto her wrists as if afraid she'll remove anything more. Blinking rapidly, as though waking from a nightmare, his grip loosens slightly. The ghost's presence grows fainter, its vacant stare shifting to where Mr. Hawthorne's fingers linger. Instinctively, Jane squeezes the man's hand tight. In an instant, the ghost evaporates. Mr. Hawthorne's shoulders sag. Who are you?" he asks, his voice steadier now, the tremors receding as color returns to his cheeks. When she meets his confused gaze, relief floods through her veins, making her feel almost giddy. "I'm Jane," she replies, smiling tentatively. The ghost is gone. How, she isn't sure, but something tells her she had something to do with it. And most importantly, Mr. Hawthorne looks better. "Jane," he says, recognition softening his tone. A small smile spreads across his face, and Jane's breath catches in her throat. She's seen this smile before, she thinks, perhaps in her dreams. Meanwhile, Ray's feels like he's surfacing from murky water, his senses sharpening gradually until his gaze lands on the small human before him. Her wide, dark eyes are filled with curiosity and something else, shyness, uncertainty. Has he scared her? He can't shake the disorienting sensation, like fog lifting slowly from his mind. Furrowing his brow, he scans the room, then looks back at her. Her soft curves are exposed, her narrow waist drawing his attention. Though he's already seen her wearing far less, he tightens his jaw, his hands moving instinctively. Before he can fully process it, he pulls off his shirt. Here he thrusts the sweater toward her, and when her small hands finally reach for it, they brush against his. A loud crash reverberates through the house, a deep, thunderous sound that makes the floor shudder beneath Reese's feet. Without thinking, he storms out of the room toward the source. When he reaches the condemned west wing, he skids to an abrupt halt. A part of the roof, a tall tower untouched since the fire, has collapsed under the weight of the snow. Wood, stone, and snow cascade through the hole, scattering across the floor in a massive heap. Cold air rushes in, biting against his skin, swirling with the faint scent of charred timber. The remnants of the old fire are still buried beneath the surface. Eliza, Bill, and Miss Teal arrive just behind him. The groundskeeper curses under his breath as he takes in the damage. "If the roof collapses here," Miss Teal mutters, "it could bring the rest of the house down with it." Reese doesn't respond immediately, his eyes fixed on the pile of debris, and beyond it, the decaying walls of the west wing. The part they all pretend doesn't exist, but is still there, festering like an old wound. "We need to fix this now," he says, his voice rough. "It can't wait." Miss Teal shakes her head, frowning deeply. "The house isn't safe as long as that wing stands. When the blizzard clears, we should move." Reese cuts her off, his tone sharp. "We're not leaving." His gaze wanders over the destroyed section again. He hears it still, the roar of the flames, Marcus's screams, Eliza's pleas echoing in his ears. The heat of it, the acrid smoke, it all clings to his skin, though not so much as his guilt. He can't leave this place. He won't. Not again. "We'll fix it," Reese repeats, his jaw clenched. "We have to keep this place standing." "But Alpha," Bill interjects, casting a wary glance at the wreckage. "The foundations are crumbling. The house is holding on by threads. Sometimes it's better to let go." Reese looks at him, his expression hardening. "We're not letting it fall apart, not while I'm still standing. Get what we need. We'll start repairs immediately." "I'll help," Sophie's voice pipes up from behind. Reese turns sharply, eyes narrowing as he spots the children. The small human is with them, and the sight of her in his sweater makes him pause. The material falls well past her knees, but doesn't hide the way her hips flare, making his wolf stir at the sight, pleased. Reese forces himself to focus on Marcus. The latter looks a little pale, and there's resentment in his eyes. He shouldn't be here. His children should never come here. It's too dangerous. "Sophie," Reese says, his voice gruff, "you and Marcus will stay where it's safe." "But Dad," the girl protests, stomping her foot, "we're bored. We want to help." Reese clenches his jaw impatiently. They don't have time for this. They need all hands on deck. But the kids? His gaze flickers between the collapse and the children. Miss Teal speaks up again. "Alpha, I need to inspect the house quickly. If more of the roof collapses, we'll be in bigger trouble." And she's right, of course, but they can't leave the children unattended. So, if Miss Teal is busy inspecting the roof, a soft voice cuts through his thoughts. "Mr. Hawthorne?" Reese's eyes snap to Jane, who instantly stammers, "Yes." He pushes, and Jane swallows, her cheeks flushing slightly. "That is," she pursues a little less assuredly, "if it pleases you, I wouldn't mind." Reese's brow furrows. "You wouldn't mind what?" he presses. Jane meets his gaze. "I'm happy to watch them," she exclaims. "The kids. I'm used to them. She clears her throat. "I'm good with kids. I've babysat before." Reese wants to reply, but his wolf is picking up on a subtle change in the girl's scent. It's become sweet and thick now, swirling around him distractingly. All the while she watches him, her eyes wide and her pulse fluttering tellingly. So Reese averts his gaze. She's human, a tiny, delicate human he could easily harm if he's not careful. But God, does she smell good. "Jane, can we bake cookies?" Sophie chimes in, her face lighting up. Even Marcus seems interested now, the anger in his eyes evaporating as he turns toward Jane. Reese's jaw tightens as he weighs his options. Time is ticking. Jane's offer solves their immediate problem. The children seem to like her well enough, and she's stuck here anyway. "Fine," he snaps, more command than approval. "Jane will watch the children. But Marcus," he gestures for his son to come closer, pulling him aside while waving Sophie and the human out of the room. "Don't shift in front of her," Reese says quietly, his voice stern. "No one shifts in front of her." Marcus looks thoroughly unimpressed. "No," he says, making Reese growl. "No swearing in this house." The latter snaps then, taking in his son's offended expression. He sighs. "Look," Reese puts a hand on his shoulder. "Jane is human, fragile. You know what would happen if one of us were to bite her." Marcus's expression becomes solemn. "I know, Alpha," he says. "I'll keep her safe." Reese nods, though the unease doesn't leave him as he watches Marcus follow Jane. Her scent lingers in the air, and despite himself, his wolf stirs again. The sight of her in his sweater, small and curvy with her flushed cheeks and dark eyes, stays with him longer than it should. Jane notes that the children, while looking very much alike, have widely different personalities. Sophie is bright and chirpy, though she cannot seem to hold in place, brimming with astounding energy even for someone her age. She seems to bounce from place to place at surprising speed, asking multiple questions and commenting on every little thought in her head at an increasing pace. Marcus, meanwhile, is taciturn. He doesn't seem very interested in anything, a certain melancholy ever present in his eyes. He doesn't like the attention focused on him and tends to hide his arm, the one with the burn, behind his back. Something about the way he holds himself, how his eyes become absent at times, worries Jane. She tries to engage him, but while apparently happy to stay beside them, Marcus doesn't interact much. Jane looks around for the ghost, worried it might be affecting Marcus's sullen mood, but it's nowhere to be seen. Could she have gotten rid of it for good? She doubts it. Removing things like that isn't usually how it works. As a second batch of cookies finishes baking in the oven, her thoughts drift to Mr. Hawthorne, who disappeared earlier to inspect the house and fix the roof. He's been gone for a while now. Perhaps we should light a fire and get them to come inside, she muses aloud, more to herself than the children. Marcus visibly tenses at her words, catching Jane's attention. It dawns on her. He must remember being burned. The realization saddens her deeply. Could it have happened here, in this very house, during the fire that destroyed the West Wing? Why? Sophie asks, her wide eyes brimming with curiosity. Jane pauses, trying to recall what they'd been discussing. Well, they might be cold outside on the roof. Sophie stares back, utterly confused. Why would they be cold? She asks, glancing at Marcus, who shrugs, equally puzzled by the concept. Well, because, Jane hesitates, pursing her lips. No need to keep mentioning fires, she thinks quickly. Never mind. Sophie grabs a cookie and shoves it into her mouth before declaring, "If I get cold, I turn." Her statement makes no sense, but she seems satisfied nonetheless. Turn? Turn to what? Jane asks gently, placing a hand on Sophie's shoulder as Marcus snaps harshly, "Shut up." The little girl flinches under his tone, but Jane reassures her. It's all right. To Marcus, she adds softly, attempting to ease the tension, but the boy surprises her by snarling, a look so unexpected on such a young face that Jane startles. "I'll tell father you were mean," Sophie taunts, sticking out her tongue. "Don't call him that," Marcus snaps back, crossing his arms defiantly. "Kids," Jane interjects, raising her hands in appeasement. "Yelling ruins the cookies. You wouldn't want a cookie ruined, would you?" Both children's eyes widen, effectively chastised. "What do you call Mr. Hawthorne, Marcus?" Jane asks carefully, handing him a cookie as an olive branch. "Alpha," he replies with a nonchalant shrug, accepting the treat. That word, again, Jane thinks. Bill had mentioned it too. She's certain of it. Before she can ask further, Sophie pipes up helpfully. "That's because he's our alpha and our father." At this, Marcus growls, snapping up from his chair and running out of the room. Sophie watches him go, her expression tinged with sadness. "Don't worry about him," she says quietly. "Dad says he's sad because he misses Mom." She looks up at Jane earnestly. "I don't remember her at all, so it's okay that she's gone." An uncomfortable weight settles in Jane's stomach. "I'm sorry, Sophie," she murmurs softly, leaving the little girl to tend to another batch of cookies heating in the oven. She follows after Marcus, relieved to find he hasn't gone far. He's seated in the dining room, crouched in a corner. Sitting beside him, she begins cautiously. "You know, my mom is gone too." Marcus shrugs, but doesn't push her away, which Jane takes as progress. "Sometimes I worry I'm going to forget about her," she admits softly. "It makes me feel sad." Marcus blinks, lifting his face toward hers. His voice is small when he asks, "Really?" "Yes," she nods. "So I write about her in the journal remains with me." Marcus's fists clench. "I don't know how to write," he confesses, "or at least not very well." The alpha doesn't like to talk about her. He says he doesn't mind, but I know he does. Jane marks his surprise. "If you'd like, I could help you learn to write," she offers. "And in the meantime, you can talk to me about your mom whenever you want." "What was she like?" she asks, placing a careful hand on Marcus's shoulder. The boy doesn't reply. Instead, he points at something behind Jane, a painting. She realizes it upon turning around. The painting is of a woman with long black hair and clear blue eyes. She knows where she's seen that woman before, because that woman, Marcus's mom, is the ghost she's seen hanging around Mr. Hawthorne twice now. Oh, God, she tells herself, biting back a grimace. The ghost is his dead wife. Reyes collapses onto his bed, exhaustion weighing him down like a lead blanket. 3 days of ceaseless work on the roof, battling the storm. He must be getting old. The storm made it difficult, snow piling up, the wind howling through the gaps in the roof as they tried to patch it. But Reyes had pushed through with Bill's help. Bill, who was worried the small human, Jane, would take notice of how quickly they'd worked. "She can't know about us," he'd said, as if Reyes didn't already know that. His clothes are still wet, caked with mud and snow, but the thought of changing, hell, the thought of getting up feels like too much. He stares up at the ceiling, his eyes wide open, pain building behind them. He should rest, but his thoughts scatter, drifting from one place to another, always returning to the same source of unease. When would the tiny human be able to leave? He's worried about the children becoming too attached. Sophie has already taken a liking to her, though Sophie is starved for affection, for joy, for light. Her bright, boisterous energy reminds him so much of Eliza. Like her mother, the child is strong, determined, and full of life. It haunts him. And then there's Marcus, who's nothing like his sister, having taken after his father's side of the family. Reyes runs a heavy hand over his face. The boy is distant, sullen, carrying a quiet melancholy that worries Reyes more than he'd ever admit aloud. Marcus misses his mother. He'd been 4 when she died. He remembers her sometimes. It feels like he even remembers what happened. When he looks at Reyes with such heavy betrayal in his eyes, Marcus never talks about it, though. Certainly not to Reyes, but perhaps to somebody else, someone warmer. Passing through the drawing room yesterday, Reyes had spotted the boy bent over a book, Jane by his side, patiently guiding him through words. It was the first time in a long while that Reyes had seen Marcus engage in something other than honing his shifter skills. Jane would have to leave, though. Perhaps she could help Marcus open up before that. Reese doesn't want the boy to grow up burdened with the weight of becoming alpha like he has. He loves his pack, but the responsibility has cost him dearly. The children are fiercely loved, yet he feels out of his depth with them. They are a mirror of the woman he couldn't save, and a constant reminder that it should have been Reese who died that day. The world would be better without him, he thinks. The children would still be with Eliza now. It feels as though she is still here, whispering plaintively in his ears. A familiar cold settles over his skin. Her loss lingers always, a dull throb at the back of his mind, but when it sharpens, like it does now, the room grows darker. Reese shifts slightly in bed, but sleep continues to evade him. His thoughts grow heavier, more scattered. Jane watches as Sophie bounces around the kitchen, her energy infectious while they prepare a tray piled high with breakfast leftovers. Marcus, ever quiet, stands by her side, half-heartedly arranging food on the tray, his eyes distant. None of this sits well with Jane. Yes, the children have everything they need here. The house is grand, the meals plentiful, but their mother is gone, and their father, it feels as though Mr. Hawthorne is always busy, always finding something to do to avoid his own children. It's sweet you're making him breakfast, Jane says softly as they work. The clatter of plates and utensils, the only other sound in the grand, quiet kitchen. Sophie beams. Do you think he'll like our drawings? Jane's gaze falls on the two artworks the kids had prepared yesterday, laid out on the table. Sophie's is vibrant and full of color, rainbows and swirls of sunshine in every corner. But it's Marcus's skill that catches her attention. He'd not only helped Sophie draw her mermaid's tail, but also sketched a deep, detailed portrait of Mr. Hawthorne, though adding a long scar to the left side of the man's face. Is your father a pirate? Jane asks, wanting very much to encourage his creative endeavors. Unfortunately, Marcus looks unimpressed with her efforts. That's not my dad, that's Uncle Cliff. Balancing the large tray between her hands, Jane follows Sophie and Marcus upstairs. The children are eager, Sophie skipping ahead, Marcus more reserved but still following along. When they reach Mr. Hawthorne's bedroom, Marcus is the one to knock, his small fist rapping against the door. There's no answer. Sophie leans in closer to Jane, whispering loudly, "Maybe he's still asleep." Marcus, already retreating, shrugs, "We should just leave it." Memories of Jane's own childhood flood back, those long, empty days at the orphanage, waiting for someone to care, for someone to notice she existed. She won't let these children feel that way. Adjusting the tray in her hands, she takes a breath and, before she can second-guess herself, barges into Mr. Hawthorne's room. "Mr. Hawthorne!" she calls out, her voice echoing through the quiet space. He is sprawled across his bed, dressed in muddied, snow-soaked clothes. His eyes are wide, staring vacantly at the ceiling, his jaw clenched, his entire body rigid. By his side, grazing his left cheek, is his wife, the ghost. Jane's heart pounds in her chest, a sickening horror creeping through her veins at the sight of the ghost. Its bony fingers trail over Mr. Hawthorne's pale face. Sophie's small voice calls from behind her dad, and panic surges through Jane. Her eyes dart around the room, searching for something, anything to help. Her gaze falls on the tray in her hands, and she grabs a small salt shaker. Without thinking, she steps toward the bed, spins around, and throws the salt over her left shoulder toward the ghost. The effect is immediate. It vanishes, the air growing lighter. Jane exhales in relief. Jane paces, biting her lip as she watches Reese from afar. He's with the children, laughing at something Sophie said. For the first time since she arrived, he seems lighter, the usual grim weight absent, if only for now. She wishes she could do more. Watching him smile genuinely only makes the need to help him more urgent. He looks so kind when he smiles, so young, not weighed down by the invisible chains of grief. His golden hair catches the sunlight, his broad shoulders and easy movements showing a different man than the one she saw sprawled across his bed, pale and broken. It's clear the ghost of his wife haunts him in more ways than one, even if he can't see her. She's there, pulling him away, making him absent or angry. But right now, his deep chuckles are pulling a smile from Marcus, and Jane's chest tightens with the need to protect this version of him, the kind, warm, happy version. But how? She's never felt the weight of her gift, her ability to see ghosts so keenly. Maybe it's not a curse after all. Maybe it's the one thing that can help Reese. If she had honed her skills, she could have already found a way to free him from his wife's ghost. Lost in thought, Jane doesn't notice Bill until he's beside her, his brows furrowed in concern. "Something on your mind?" he asks. Jane blinks, startled. I wish I could do some research on, she trails off. These people, her Uncle Bill, they don't look at her like she's crazy. They think she's normal, and she doesn't want to change that. Bill strokes his chin. The library here is vast. You might find something useful. A library here? Jane hadn't thought of that. Without wasting another moment, she thanks Bill and hurries off. Her heart pounds as she makes her way to the first floor. The library is enormous, its shelves stretching floor to ceiling, filled with old, dusty books. The soft golden light from the windows casts a peaceful glow. She scans the shelves until a title catches her eye, Occult Practices and Spectral Beings. Her heart skips as she pulls the leather-bound book free. The pages are stiff and yellowed. Sitting in a quiet corner, she flips through it. Ghosts, it says, are spirits tied to the living by unresolved business, often attached to a place or person. To help a ghost move on, their old wounds must be healed. Jane shudders, thinking of the fire that had claimed Mrs. Hawthorne's life. How could she possibly heal that? As she reads on, she finds a section on relief floods her as she creates protective circles to keep the ghosts at bay. Tonight, if she can, she'll draw one around Reese. Jane walks across the space toward the large bay window, her gaze drifting to the snowy ground that blankets the manor. The snowfall continues but seems to be slowing. Is the storm about to break? Across the field, beyond the icy white flakes, 3 wolves roam near the edge of the woods. The night is quiet, save for the soft hum of his children's voices playing nearby. Reese glances out the window and notices that the snowstorm has finally begun to lose its intensity. The wind no longer howls, and the snowflakes fall more gently now, blanketing the ground in a soft white glow. It should break by tomorrow, Reese comments absently, his eyes still on the fading snow. At his words, Marcus grows rigid, his little shoulders tensing. Reese catches the movement from the corner of his eye and frowns. What's wrong, Marcus? The boy remains silent, stubbornly so, his gaze fixed on the floor. Before Reese can press further, Sophie suddenly bursts into tears, her tiny hands wiping furiously at her eyes as she chokes out, I don't want Jane to leave. Reese's chest tightens. He hates seeing Sophie cry, thinks both of these kids have cried enough for a lifetime. He kneels beside her, placing a gentle hand on her back. Sophie, it can't be helped, he soothes, though the words feel hollow even to him. She doesn't belong here. She's a human. But she's nice, Sophie insists between sobs. She tells the best mermaid stories. Reese's heart twists, and he glances toward Marcus, who hasn't said anything but is watching him carefully. He doesn't miss the hopeful look in his son's eyes or the way Marcus's lips press into a thin line, betraying his own desire for Jane to stay. Reese knows they've grown attached to her in the short time she's been with them, and the thought troubles him. Look, Jane doesn't want to stay here forever. She has friends and family to get back to. Reese tries again, pushing away the softening of his resolve at the sight of Sophie's tear-streaked face. She has no parents, Marcus says quietly. She's like us. She's alone. The words hit Reese harder than they should. He blinks, his frown deepening as he looks down at Marcus. No parents. Alone. The realization sends a pang of something akin to guilt through him. It's true, Bill interjects, having been quietly observing. Jane grew up in an orphanage. Her parents died when she was young. She's been on her own ever since. Reese's thoughts drift to Jane. He hadn't given much thought to where she came from, but the idea of her being so utterly alone gnaws at him. Wolves live in packs, and while Jane might not be a wolf, he can't help his protective instincts from flaring to life. Maybe she could stay. She could make a good nanny, someone to watch over the kids when he's preoccupied with pack matters. It would certainly take some of the burden off his shoulders. But then he remembers what she is. "It's too dangerous for a human to live among us," Reese says, his voice gruff. "She doesn't belong here." He looks at his children, trying to explain. Bill nods slowly, his shoulders sagging in resignation. Even he knows the dangers. Humans, no matter how well-meaning, rarely thrived around shifters. Their world was a dangerous one. The risks were too great. The night is thick with silence, broken only by the faint creaks of the old manor settling. Jane lies in bed, her heart pounding as she listens for any sign of movement in the darkened house. Finally, she slips out of bed, her fingers trembling slightly as they reach for the door handle. She glances out into the hall, peering through the dim shadows. The cold seeps into her bones as she descends the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The farther she goes, the more the darkness presses in. Something haunted, filled with secrets, waiting in the walls. As she reaches the bottom of the stairs, she half expects something to emerge from the shadows. But there's only the stillness, the cold, and the pounding of her own heart in her ears. She exhales slowly, glancing around the empty rooms. Everyone's in bed. The fire has long since gone out, leaving only faint embers in the hearth. She wraps her arms around herself and climbs back up the stairs, the sensation of being watched prickling at the back of her neck. Her hands shake as she reaches Reese's door, her breath catching in her throat as she stands before it. The storm will break tomorrow, and Reese will ask her to leave. This is her last chance to help him. Slowly, Jane pushes the door open. It groans softly on its hinges, the sound like a warning, but she steps inside anyway. Her gaze falls upon Reese, the sight of him dreamlike, grotesque, and utterly horrifying all at once. He's lying in bed, still, his chest barely rising. Hovering above him is a gaunt face with blackened lips pressed against his. Jane's first instinct is to flee, but Reese's body is trembling, his skin deathly pale. She rushes forward. "You're hurting him," she hisses. The ghost's dark, vacant eyes flicker toward her, and for a moment, Jane thinks it's going to strike, but then it vanishes, melting into the shadows as if it was never there. Reese's body goes limp. Jane falls to her knees beside him, shaking his shoulder. "Sir, wake up." His skin is cold, his pulse faint beneath her touch. She remembers the book, the protective circle. Her hands fumble for the chalk she'd stuffed in her pocket, and she hurriedly draws beneath the bed, following the instructions as best she can in her frantic state. When she's finished, she rushes back to Reese, her palms settling against the faint beat of his heart. When his eyelids finally flutter, she thinks she's going to cry. "Jane," he murmurs, looking at her through heavy, confused eyes. "You're awake," she breathes, holding back a relieved sob. "What?" Reese blinks. "What are you doing here?" Realizing her hand is still resting on his bare chest, she pulls back. She hadn't thought of what she would tell him if he became aware of her presence here in his bedroom at night. I wanted to thank you," she stammers, her cheeks heating under his gaze. Her gaze lingers on the broad expanse of his chest, the faint sheen of sweat clinging to his skin. Reese sits up slightly. "Thank me?" he says, frowning deeper. "For what?" "For saving me." Jane's voice is quiet, barely above a whisper. "No one's ever done anything like that for me before." Ree blinks at her, confusion deepening in his eyes. "It was the least I could do." "No," she interrupts, emotion thick in her throat. The words spill out unbidden, too true to hold back. No one's ever looked out for me like that before. I've always been on my own. But you saved me. You owed me nothing, and yet you still risked your life. Ray falls silent, troubled. You're wrong about me, he mutters, averting his gaze. I'm not. Jane cups his face with trembling hands. I think you're wonderful. His gaze darkens, piercing through her. Warmth spreads over her skin again, but she forces herself to look away, her eyes landing instead on his bare chest. They linger far longer than they should, on the curve of his shoulders, the way his muscles flex as he breathes, strength tangible in every firm line of his body. Jane's throat goes dry. The sight of him stirs unfamiliar sensations, a deep craving that coils tighter into something urgent, pleasant, but burning. An ache builds within her, making her fingers twitch with longing. She imagines feeling the heat of his skin under her palms, wonders what his mouth might feel like against hers if he were to pull her closer. It would feel nothing short of perfect. Unable to resist, she leans in, closing her eyes. In her mind, the distance between them melts away, replaced by images of his touch, his embrace. What are you doing? Reese's voice cuts sharply through the haze. His hand grips her shoulder, holding her in place. When their eyes meet again, his are cold and detached. Burning with embarrassment, Jane quickly pulls back, desperate to flee the room and hide her shame. Reese's hand slides from her shoulder to her wrist. Wait, he says. Her heart leaps, hope flaring like a flame catching on dry wood. For a moment, her mind races with possibilities. His arms pulling her close, his mouth covering hers, their bodies entwined. All she can think about is how much she wants him, how much she needs him. Would you consider working for me? Reese asks, calm and matter-of-fact. Jane blinks, dazed. What? I'm offering you a job, he repeats, still holding her wrist, his tone unaffected. Stay here as a nanny for Sophie and Marcus. The words hit her like a cold slap. His gaze remains detached, composed, leaving no room for misinterpretation. He has no interest in her whatsoever. Swallowing hard, Jane realizes the truth. This is all he sees her as now. He's not only offering her a place to stay, but also a job, and she nods, forcing a smile. Yes, thank you, she says. A brief, almost imperceptible smile touches his lips before Ray's releases her wrist. Jane turns, ready to flee the room, when he calls her name. She freezes, her heart lurching reluctantly as she turns back to him. It would be best, he says, his voice low, if you avoided coming into my room from now on, especially if you're going to be working for me. Feeling small and foolish, Jane lowers her gaze, nodding quickly. Of course, sir, she mumbles, chastised. Without another word, she hurries out of the room, her mind swirling in a storm of confused frustration. When she shuts the door to her room behind her and climbs into bed, her body is still humming with need, though her heart is heavy with rejection. What just happened? Her eyes close, and she tries to steady her breath, pressing her hand to her chest, then lower and lower, imagining her fingers are his. How can it all feel so good while leaving her so utterly confused, yearning for more? Sleep won't come. Ray's lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, but Jane's scent still clings to the room, wrapping around him, so sweet it's indecent. She shouldn't have been in his room, but mostly he shouldn't have let her stay as long as she did. He'd been too intoxicated by the blatant lust in her eyes, the heady sweetness in the air. Being human, she hadn't even realized how obvious her scent had been, betraying her desire. But Ray's was a wolf, and he had felt it. Change thickening with arousal, all for him. All for him. He can still smell it now, and it drives him mad. His body aching with a raw, primal hunger he hasn't felt in years, if ever. All he can think about is the little human, how close he'd come to losing control with her, how badly he'd wanted to feel her. He exhales sharply, trying to push it away, but how could he? The image of her is burned into his mind, the way she smelled, the way her body had looked under that thin nightgown. Ray's groans. Couldn't she tell it left every curve of her body exposed? So soft, so damn feminine. He squeezes his eyes shut, but it's no use. He can still see the lines of her, the full swell of her breast, the gentle dip of her waist, the roundness of her hips. Heat burns low in his gut. He knows damn well he can't touch her, not like that. Unfortunately, he can remember, and he does. Those long lashes fluttering against her flushed cheeks, the little breathless sound she'd made as she parted her lips, leaning in closer, practically begging to be kissed. His fingers twitch at the thought, at the torturous possibility. Jane wanted him. That much was obvious now. What would she have done if he'd claimed her mouth, if he'd allowed himself to touch her? He imagines his hands on her. Her hands trail down his waist, gripping his hips tightly as she pulls him closer. How far would her blush spread if he touched her like that? How breathless could he make her by kissing the soft skin of her neck, dragging his teeth along her throat, feeling her pulse race beneath his lips? He shifts in bed, but the tension only grows. Now he's wondering how she'd taste, how she'd feel beneath him, her skin flushed, damp with sweat, her voice thick with pleasure. How intoxicating would her scent be if he coaxed every ounce of pleasure from her, if he unraveled her completely? Her body trembling with release, her breath ragged, calling out his name. Cursing under his breath, Reese forces himself to his feet. His bare feet hit the cold floor as he strides toward the bathroom. The moment the icy water hits him, he grits his teeth, letting the shock drive away the heat coursing through his veins. He can't let this continue, not with Jane. She's driving him mad, her scent haunting him, but she's human, fragile. No matter how much his body craves hers, no matter how desperately he wants to claim her, she's vulnerable, innocent, she's off limits. Jane barely sees Reese over the next month. The man departs almost as soon as the weather clears, leaving her alone with intrusive thoughts and 2 children who cling to her in their father's absence. Still, both kids are doing well. As the days pass, they slowly open up to Jane, sharing their thoughts, dreams, and hopes with their new nanny. Yet, despite their growing trust, neither child allows her to join them on their long afternoon trips into the woods. Reese had warned her about this, assuring her it was fine for them to roam alone, instructing her only to fetch Bill if they weren't back by nightfall. During the day, Jane finds herself saying his name silently, replaying it in her mind. At night, she dreams of him, his lips against her skin, his voice murmuring words she can't quite recall upon waking, but which leave her body aching. She catches glimpses of him in fleeting moments, or, more often, in the portrait gallery she's discovered. It's filled with paintings of Hawthorne family members spanning generations. Unlike everyone else, Reese has not 1, but 2 portraits hanging there. One where he smiles brightly, full of life, and another where he scowls, cold and domineering. In the first week of his absence, Jane once asked Miss Teal when she thought he'd return. The woman's evasive response implied Mr. Hawthorne had better things to do than entertain her, accompanied by a knowing glance that practically screamed at Jane to drop the subject. It was for the best, Jane told herself. Staying away kept him safe from the ghost of his late wife, or so she tried to believe. But then Sophie would ask about him, or Marcus's eyes would light up at the mention of his name, and her frustration with his absence would surge back with full force. Meanwhile, the children roamed freely, their laughter echoing through the woods. The woods were a place where Jane often helped Uncle Bill around the grounds, sharing her worries about Reese's absence and how it affected the children. Bill, too, seemed troubled, though he always defended Reese, saying it was difficult for him to return now that the mistress was gone. Jane hadn't seen her ghost since Reese left, but it still haunted her, almost as much as the man did. She couldn't stop wondering about her, what she had been like when she was alive. Once, she cautiously asked Bill what had happened to her. He grew evasive, pursing his lips thoughtfully. "You wouldn't understand, Jane. It's hard to explain. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Near the end, she wasn't really herself anymore. Not even her children could reach her. She stayed in her room, staring into space, not eating, not talking to anyone but the master. It took a toll on him. He did all he could for her." Jane's throat tightened as she pressed further. But what was she like before? Bill's face softened with a fond smile. Joyful and full of life, strong, a force of nature. When she wanted something, you could be sure she'd get it. Everyone loved Eliza very much, no one more than Mr. Hawthorne. "I'm sure," Jane murmured thoughtlessly. Bill's expression turned solemn as he concluded. "The master adored her, Jane, adored her." Her heart ached for Reese and the children. They all adored her. And unknown to them, she was still there, though not truly herself, just as she hadn't been before death claimed her, stuck in silent despair. Reese sat in his office, sunlight filtering through the windows, hinting at the nearing arrival of spring. But the warmth felt distant, barely reaching him. It was his first real day back after months away, and though he was home, the familiar heaviness had already settled in. He'd been gone too long, and his children had grown. Sophie had become more confident, Marcus more childlike. Jane's presence had brought a lightness to them both, something he couldn't provide. Now, Reese couldn't help but wonder if it was time for them to leave this house. The isolation weighed on them all. Perhaps it was time to move on. But if they were to live among the pack, Jane wouldn't be able to stay. The thought of the small human lingered, tugging at his mind. He wondered what she thought of his absence. Surely she believed him a terrible father. He'd been away for so long, and Jane didn't even know he was an alpha, had no idea what kept him away, which made it all the worse. He'd seen her with the children, ever present and patient. He wanted her opinion about the potential move, which was why he'd asked Miss Teal to fetch her, to know what she thought about taking the children away from here in the near future. As Reese sat there, something shifted in the room. A cold weight settled on his shoulders, the familiar sense of dread wrapping around him tight and unrelenting. The optimism he'd felt moments ago began to waver. A voice, low and insidious, whispered in his mind, clouding his thoughts. "This is the children's home." Murmurs creep through his consciousness, insistent and unrelenting. "They wouldn't fare well away from here, and neither would you. You belong here." His grip tightens on the arms of his chair, knuckles whitening as the cold seeps deeper, settling into his bones like an unwelcome guest. This house, it is their home. They grew up here. How could he take the children away from this, from her? A sharp pain blooms behind his eyes, guilt and doubt swirling in a suffocating storm. Eliza's memory presses down on him, heavy and unyielding. It's wrong, all wrong. He failed her. He always fails everyone he loves, leaving them to die in his stead. A soft knock interrupts his spiral. Jane steps in, covered in flour, cheeks flushed, hair wild. The sight of her, so full of life, eases the tension in his chest. "I apologize, sir," she says, her voice light, amused. "The children are preparing a tea party for you. There's been plenty of baking going on." He wants to smile back, but the pounding in his head grows louder, drowning out thought. Blood rushes in his ears, his chest tightening, until his response dissolves into the haze. "Sir?" Jane's smile falters, concern narrowing her eyes. She steps closer, squinting slightly. He follows her gaze, but sees nothing, only the cold, pressing down, relentless. His breath hitches, fingers gripping the edge of the desk. The children, this house, he can't take them away. He can't leave. Eliza is here. She's always here, watching over them, watching over him. How could he have even considered it? There's movement beside him, something warm settling on his knee. Then he blinks, and suddenly Jane is in front of him, touching him. Through her palm, small and warm, the cold begins to recede. "Jane?" he asks, confusion clouding his voice. She smiles, warm and kind, sunlight catching in her hair, her scent blooming sweetly. "You are a breath of fresh air in this stifling house, Jane," he observes. A blush spreads across her cheeks, making his wolf purr with satisfaction. He clears his throat, and she practically jumps away. "I apologize, sir," she says hurriedly, lashes long and dark against her rosy cheeks. Beautiful. "Jane, how many times do I have to tell you to call me Rays?" "Well, it's just that no one else does, sir." Jane looks flustered. He chuckles, distracted. She is even lovelier than he remembered, and his wolf craves her. But he can't. He won't cross that line. She is human, fragile. What a damn shame that is. "Mistress Teal did say you wanted a word," Jane asks, pulling him from his thoughts. He frowns. He had wanted a word, something about moving, about taking the children away. But no, he couldn't. How could he ever think such a thing? "I was wondering how you were faring here," he says instead. "Are you happy with us?" "Of course I am, sir," Jane replies immediately. Sir, I'm very happy here in your home." Her pulse quickens as she speaks, betraying her calm demeanor. Why wouldn't she be happy? This place, though isolated, holds warmth in its walls. Or at least it should. But does it truly? Or is it only the ghosts who linger? Be happier surrounded by people your age, with friends to share your time. He's not sure why he's even asking her that. Perhaps because he worries the little human may want to leave them. She will have to eventually, though. She doesn't belong with them. "I've never really had any friends," Jane confesses, drawing Reese away from his thoughts. "No friends?" He frowns. "I don't believe it. You're too good not to have friends." Jane looks deliciously flustered at that. People think I'm weird. Reese stares at the small human and laughs. "Weird?" he repeats. The girl shrugs sheepishly. There's something there, he thinks, something she isn't telling him. And though Reese isn't one to pry, the girl looks sad now, and he just won't have that. "I don't think you're weird at all," he offers. The look Jane gives him is so hopeful, it feels like the most fragile, precious thing in the entire world. Jane stands in a sunlit field vibrant with the scent of wildflowers. The air is warm, the sky a cloudless blue. Reese is there, reclining on the grass with a rare, peaceful smile playing at his lips. The children are running around, their laughter light and carefree as they chase butterflies. "Come on, Jane, come play with us," Sophie calls, her voice ringing through the air as she spins in circles, her golden curls bouncing. Jane laughs, the sound bubbling up naturally. She moves, ready to join them, but a strong hand wraps around her wrist, holding her in place. She turns, startled, to find Reese looking at her. "Stay with me," he says, his voice low and playful. Jane feels a flutter of warmth in her chest, but the children, "They're fine," he interrupts gently, pulling her to him. She stumbles, landing squarely on his lap. Reese's laugh is a deep, rich sound that vibrates through her. Jane's heart races, flustered by his pleased smile. "I'm not sure this is what friends do," she manages, her gaze flitting to his lips, only inches from hers. Reese smiles. "But you don't really want to be friends, do you, darling?" he teases, his voice dangerously smooth. His thumb brushes her lower lip, and Jane shivers, a soft moan escaping her. Her body responds before she can stop it, leaning into his touch, her eyes closing at the pull. Reese's lips on hers are soft and gentle at first, but his kiss quickly deepens, hungrier and more insistent. Jane melts into it, arching toward Reese, pressing closer, craving more. She gasps, but then he pulls back slightly. When she looks at him, his eyes, "You're not Eliza," he says. The warmth fades, the light turns cold. Reese is pale beneath her, his lips bluish, his eyes vacant, staring through her as if she's not there. Jane wakes with a sharp gasp, her eyes flying open as her body jerks upright. She's in her room, the night soft and dim around her. The remnants of her dream cling to her mind, but the chill is real. She can feel it crawling over her skin, cold, icy. And then she sees it, hovering above her, twisted and inhuman. The ghost. Its face is contorted, its eyes black and empty, a wide, malevolent grin stretching across its lips. "He's mine," the ghost hisses, its voice like a shard of ice slicing through Jane's terror. "He belongs to me." Jane's body is frozen, locked in shock and fear. Her mind screams at her to run, to do something, anything, but she can't. The ghost lunges for her, and Jane shuts her eyes, a scream caught in her throat. The door to her room bursts open, Reese's voice cutting through the darkness. "Jane, what's wrong?" Strong arms pull her from the bed, warm and solid. "Open your eyes for me, sweetheart," Reese pleads, his voice thick with concern. His hands gently caress her hair, shaking her lightly. Jane obeys, meeting his worried gaze. Relief floods her, and she buries her face in his neck, inhaling the comforting scent of him. "Are you all right?" he whispers, his voice trembling. "Me?" he asks, sounding confused as his hand strokes her hair, soothing her. "I'm not the one who screamed. What happened?" Jane clings to him, her heart still racing. But when she glances toward the corner of the room, it's still there, watching her. In that moment, Jane knows the ghost has to be dealt with for good. Reese can't stay trapped like this, haunted by something that's no longer alive. And he doesn't belong to a dead woman. Jane might not be much, but she's alive, and she wants him, all of him, for herself. The car rumbles as Jane drives down winding roads, gripping the steering wheel tightly. She needs answers, something to banish Eliza's spirit once and for all. but she's read every book on the matter in the mansion's library, and she's running out of ideas. With the children safe with Bill and Reese away, Jane seizes the opportunity. The nearest town doesn't have a proper library, so she drives further south. Her mind races as the summer heat slaps her in the face the moment she steps out of the car. Wiping her brow, she scans the streets. It's a modern town, buzzing with life but unfamiliar. After getting lost and asking for directions, Jane finally finds a chain bookstore. But as she flips through the shelves, her hope fades. Nothing useful for what she needs. Frustration rises as she rubs at her temples. What is she going to do? The ghost is becoming more aggressive. Jane feels Eliza's presence everywhere now, even when Reese isn't home. She shudders, worry clinging to her gut. A young salesman interrupts her thoughts. "Looking for something about ghosts?" he asks, offering a sheepish grin. "More like something specialized," Jane mutters. He points vaguely down the street. "Try the store at the end of town." Jane heads there, the heat oppressive. The place looks run down, more like a comic shop than anything helpful. With a sigh, she steps inside, and everything changes. The air cools, the harsh lights dim, and the shop stretches out, old and vast. Dusty shelves rise around her, the scent of aged paper thick in the air. The street outside looks darker, narrower, unfamiliar. Confused, Jane steps out and back in again, but the world beyond the door stays bright. Inside, it's as though she stepped into another place entirely. She does this a few more times, stepping in and out, trying to make sense of it. "You keep going at it, and you'll end up getting stuck," a voice suddenly says, startling her. Jane jumps, spinning around to the far end of the room. Sprawled on a too-small couch is a young man, pinching the bridge of his nose tiredly. "Are you okay?" Jane asks. The guy makes a sorry sight. His eyes are closed, but his face is twisted into a grimace. His skin has a slightly sickly tint, and his limbs are altogether too long for the small couch. "Fine," he waves a lazy hand in her direction. "So go on then, kid. What will it be?" Jane blinks. "I'm sorry," she says, looking around as if someone's about to pop out to explain what's going on. "I'm not sure. Where are we?" "In my store, obviously." The young man sighs when Jane keeps quiet. "Look, if you're not going to be making your move today, can you just—" "My wish?" Jane parrots, confused. The young man snaps one eye open, a bright green eye that makes him look somewhat feline. "If you found this shop, then you must have a wish," he observes, expression bored. Jane is suddenly overcome with the utmost certainty that this man, with messy copper hair, may look young, but he's anything but. She doesn't know what he is, but the sight of him makes her uneasy. There's something odd about him, ancient and dark. "Are you a ghost?" she asks timidly. She's never seen such a human-looking ghost. He raises an eyebrow before sagging back into the armchair of the couch. "I'm a magician," he says, "and I grant wishes to whoever is desperate enough to make one, like you. So, if you have some pressing desire, now's your chance, kid." Jane begins to look around the shop for any hidden camera. "Can you do anything about ghosts?" she asks, mind swirling with questions. "You're very focused on ghosts," the young man grunts. "You're being haunted by one?" Jane gapes slightly. This is the first time in her life where she mentions ghosts to someone without getting laughed at immediately. "Yes," she exclaims, relief flooding her body. "Or, well, not me exactly. My boss. Friend," she corrects. "Your boss? Friend?" The magician, or whoever he is, lets out a long, suffering groan. muttering something to himself about not being nearly drunk enough for this. Jane deduces he isn't particularly happy with her presence, and dread settles in. What if this person, the only other one in the world she's ever met who seems to be taking ghosts seriously, refuses to help her? "Please," she says, stepping closer into the shop. "My friend's in danger, and I don't think I could live with myself if something were to happen to him." The young man snorts. "Then make a wish," he says. "But I must warn you, if I grant it, I'll be taking whatever it is you love most." Jane frowns. She doesn't know if this is true, but in the case that it is, "The man I'm trying to save, he's what I love most," she confesses, face heating up. It's the first time she's ever said the thought out loud. A small, surprised gasp escapes her. Meanwhile, her host lowers his head below the couch, reaching for something underneath it, which turns out to be a bottle of what is most likely alcohol. "If you make your wish and your boyfriend is what you love most," he says, opening his bottle. "He isn't my boyfriend," Jane interrupts, her heartbeat picking up as she adds in a small voice. "I do love him very much, though." The magician rolls his eyes while taking a long gulp of his drink. "Well," he says, "if you make a wish and your hopeless crush really is what you love most, then as a consequence for the wish, you'll probably be apart from him forever." Jane's heart twists painfully at the words, "away from Reese forever." She cannot bear the thought, cannot even imagine ever being happy again if away from him. The magician takes in her crumbling expression and sighs. "Here," he waves his bottle at Jane. "Have some, it'll help." "What is it?" Jane asks curiously. "A magical brew which makes all feelings of hopelessness go away." "It looks like whiskey," Jane comments. "Precisely," the magician smirks. Jane takes a careful look at him. There's a deep-rooted sadness behind his green orbs that's making her feel more lonely than she ever has. "Are you sure you're not a ghost?" she asks. "Pretty sure." He waves his bottle again, and this time Jane does accept to take a small sip. It tastes better than expected. "Does it make me selfish if I decide not to make a wish I know could help him?" she asks with a sigh. "It probably does. If there's a chance to free Reese of Eliza, she should take it, but at the cost of losing him." The thought compels her to take another sip of whiskey because she doesn't know what to do with her hands. "You could always tell him to wish his ghost away," the magician observes. "He doesn't know it's there, and he wouldn't believe me if I told him," Jane replies, bringing the bottle to her lips. For the first time in her life, it feels like there's something worth living for, and even though it's probably wrong, she doesn't want to let it go. She pauses, drinks, then takes a look at the man. "Do you know what I mean?" she asks. He doesn't respond immediately, looking troubled for a moment. "No," he then replies, taking his bottle back from her. Reese hasn't been home for hours. He'd returned to the mansion expecting to see her there for dinner, but she'd apparently driven to town earlier today. Now the sun is set, but she is still out. God knows where, probably enjoying herself with friends, he tells himself, pacing the living room. Reese sinks down onto the couch, running a hand through his hair, and reminding himself that the girl is perfectly allowed to have friends. While his wolf growls in the back of his mind, "She isn't yours," he tells himself. What if Jane isn't with someone else at all? What if she's lost or hurt somewhere? He's about to storm out of the mansion, determined to find her, when suddenly a weight settles onto his lap, warm and soft. Out of thin air, Jane appears, gazing up at him with wide, glassy eyes. "Oh, I'm home," she giggles, her voice bright and carefree as she wraps her arms around his neck. Her scent floods his senses, a mix of sweetness and something heady, tinted with alcohol. Reese stares at her, stunned. "Jane, what happened? Where did—" "I can't believe that teleportation thing worked," she replies cryptically. Leaning her forehead against his chest, she groans. "Met a magician," she mumbles sleepily. "Might have a solution for the ghost." Reese frowns, confused. "The ghost? What are you talking about?" But then it hits him. Her scent, the flush on her cheeks, the slight slur in her words. "Jane," he asks, amused, "have you been drinking?" She tilts her head back, looking up at him with a dazed smile. Her giggles bubble up, and she hugs him tighter, her body pressing against his in a way that makes his pulse quicken. "Well, perhaps a little. You know, I'd never had alcohol before. I like it. It feels warm and good, like you feel so good, Reese," she concludes with a whine. Reese keeps still, becoming acutely aware of how close she is, her body fitted perfectly against his. Jane's eyes flutter, and she gazes up at him, her pupils dilated. "Why is the room spinning?" she wonders, confused. "Because you're drunk, darling," Reese replies, his voice a little more tender than intended. She giggles again, rolling her eyes. "I'm not drunk," she quips, her small hand sliding down his chest. Gritting his teeth, Reese is about to respond when her lips brush against his neck, hot against his skin. "I'm just in a bit of a mood right now, that's all," Jane confesses, purposely grinding her hips down against him. Reese stills her immediately, suppressing a groan. "Right, time for bed," he hurriedly declares, lifting her into his arms. "To your bed," she wraps her arms around his neck, a pleased smile on her lips. "No, darling," Reese replies, clenching his jaw because he's picturing her trapped beneath him, her body soft and pliant under his hands, her wet, parted lips moaning his name. He clears his throat. "That wouldn't be a very good idea." Jane doesn't reply, instead snuggling into him with a content sigh. By the time Reese reaches her bedroom, she's already half asleep, her breathing slow and deep. Laying her down on her bed, he can't resist pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. As Jane watches him peacefully, her eyes half-lidded but filled with devastating adoration, Reese blames it all on the alcohol. "What did you get up to tonight?" he asks tenderly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Jane pouts, her eyes fluttering closed. "I was trying to forget," she mumbles plaintively. "Forget what?" Reese asks, his voice barely a whisper. Her answer comes in a soft, slurred confession. "You," she sighs, looking like she's seconds away from being asleep. "How in love with you I am." Reese freezes. "You're in love with me?" he repeats, heart clenching painfully in his chest. Eyes still closed, Jane stretches languidly, completely unaware of how much she's torturing him. "And it hurts because you don't feel the same," she whines, her voice growing softer. "Meanwhile, Her words trail off, but the image they paint is seared into Reese's mind nonetheless. He leans closer. "Meanwhile?" he prompts, voice rough. Jane moans softly, her lips curving into a sleepy smile. "I think about, how good he would feel it if her scent sweetened again, so dizzying, it was all he could do to keep his hands off her." But his little human is asleep before she even finishes her sentence, her breathing slow and even once more. He stares at her for a long moment, his chest tight with longing as her words linger in his mind. She'd said she loved him. The thought humbles him. He doesn't deserve that love. He aims to move, but Jane tightens her hold around his hand, and his heart swells at the sight of her. "Jane," he murmurs, I don't know what to make of all this, knowing that you love me, that you would even want me. His throat feels tight. You wouldn't if he knew what I was, if you had any idea of the kind of half-life that would await you if you were to be mine. He brings her small hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. Because make no mistake, sweetheart, I do want to make you mine. How could I not love you back? You're irresistible. Jane snuggles closer to him, as if instinctively trying to comfort him. It doesn't help. Jane is human. If she were to become his mate, her life would be difficult. She would never be able to live with him full time. It would be impossible for her to live with the pack. And he wouldn't be able to fully claim her. A mating bite would likely kill her on the spot. Neither would he be able to give her children, for bearing a shifter child would also likely kill Jane. His shoulders sag. Jane, who's so kind and loving, so full of life despite having known only hardship, remains optimistic and strong, so willing to give and make others happy. She deserves better than the future he can offer her. But it will be her choice to make. Tomorrow, he decides, he'll tell her everything, lay it all out. The truth of what he is, the risks, the impossibility of their life together. If, despite everything, Jane still wants him. She won't, a little voice tells him. Of course she won't. Reese clenches his jaw, trying to push the doubt away. Maybe not, he thinks, but I owe her the truth. She deserves to know how much she's loved, that I would choose her again and again. You're selfish and cruel, the voice hisses against the shell of his ear. Reese's breath hitches, and he stands, pulling himself away from Jane's bed. But the cold follows him, wrapping around him as he stumbles into the hallway. You'd risk her life to fulfill your selfish desire. Have you no shame? She doesn't belong here with you. The cold grips him tighter, the voice whispering darkly against his ear, scraping at his mind like nails on stone. He enters his room, barely able to think. You're a liar, he hears. You said you would always love me, and yet look what you did to me. How could you ever think it would be any different with her? Reese's head pounds, his vision blurring as a sharp stabbing pain presses against his temples. No, no, he mutters. You're right, it wouldn't work. I would hurt her. The cold grows deeper, seeping into his bones, freezing him from the inside out. Then, nothing. The voice whispers to him, soft and sickly sweet, coiling around him like a noose. His hands fly to his head, gripping his skull as if to keep it from splitting apart. Reese feels himself sinking into icy waters before everything goes black. The early morning light slices through the curtains, searing her vision. Jane groans, pulling the covers over her head in a futile attempt to block out the brightness. Her mouth is dry, her stomach churns, and her thoughts are fragmented like shards of a dream that refuse to come together. The last thing she remembers is being in the magician's shop talking about the ghost. She vaguely recalls the strange man offering her whiskey. Never again, she swears. And then a young woman with strawberry blonde hair entering. After that, her memory blurs into an incoherent haze. She sits up, blinking against the sharp pain in her temples, and gasps when she sees a figure in the corner of her room. It's Reese. He's seated in the farthest chair, watching her in silence. His expression is unreadable, but the air between them feels thick with tension. Still, it's Reese, and Jane's heart leaps with joy despite the unease. "Hi," she greets him, her voice hoarse from sleep. His face is pale, almost ashen, and something seems off about the way his hands tremble, even though they're clasped tightly together. "Is something wrong?" she asks. Reese clears his throat, the sound rough and cold. His eyes are dark, distant, almost empty. He leans forward slightly, but his gaze never meets hers. "We won't be needing your services anymore," he says, his voice flat and emotionless. "I think it would be best if you packed your things and left today." Jane's heart sinks, disbelief flooding her senses. "Why?" Her voice trembles as she struggles to process his words. "Are you angry with me?" Reese remains silent, his knuckles white where they grip the armrest of the chair. The tremors in his hands grow more pronounced, his jaw tightening as if he's holding something back. Finally, he speaks. "I found you drunk last night." Jane's stomach drops. "Do you remember?" he asks. I'm sorry," she stammers, cheeks burning with embarrassment. But he cuts her off with a sharp movement of his hand. "You told me you love me." His words strike like a hammer. Jane freezes, her heart skipping a beat. She doesn't remember that, doesn't remember saying anything like it. I didn't mean," she begins, her voice barely above a whisper. But Reese's gaze is unrelenting. "Is it true?" he demands, his tone harsh, yet cracking ever so slightly. Jane searches his face, desperate for some sign of what he wants her to say. I, her voice falters as emotions swirl within her. But she doesn't want to lie to him. "Yes, I do." Reese's face hardens further, and the fleeting glimpse of despair she thought she saw in his eyes vanishes as quickly as it appeared. "You're my nanny, Jane, my employee." The words hit like a physical blow. Jane's chest tightens, her heart shattering into pieces. "I know," she whispers, her voice trembling. "I know that. I promise you won't ever hear any more of it?" Reese stands abruptly from his chair, his movements agitated, his hands gripping his head as if he's in pain. "It isn't enough," he growls, turning his back to her. "Keeping you here, it's a betrayal." "A betrayal?" Jane repeats, confused. Because of Eliza?" At the mention of her name, Reese startles, his shoulders tensing as though he's been struck. "Yes," he finally says through gritted teeth. "Look, Reese, I know how much you loved her." "I understand that, and I would never try to take her place." Jane's heart clenches. "But Eliza, she's gone. You need to let her go. Pack your bags now." His voice is sharp, cutting through her like a knife. Jane flinches at the sudden bark of his order, her tears spilling over. "Raise, please," she begs, her voice breaking. "Let me stay and help with the children. I'm not asking you to love me. Just please don't send me away." But it barely even looks like Reese can hear her. He turns abruptly and storms out of the room, leaving Jane in stunned silence. "I can't bear to look at you," he says before disappearing, his words so detached he sounds like an entirely different person. Jane remains sitting there, the crushing weight of his words settling in her chest, heaving with silent sobs. Jane sprints out of the house, her heart pounding, tears streaming down her face. She wipes them away furiously, forcing herself to focus. There's no time to break down, not now. She needs to act. Thankfully, she finds just who she's looking for outside his house, tending to some firewood. The moment he spots her, his eyes widen in concern. "Uncle Bill," she gasps, breathless, "can I borrow your car?" The man blinks, surprised by the urgency in her voice. "Jane, what's going on?" His voice is thick with worry as he takes in her tear-streaked face. Jane hastily wipes her cheeks, trying to compose herself. Nothing, she lies, her voice trembling. I just need to go to town for a bit. Bill steps closer. But Jane, he says gently, you've been crying. Her lips quiver despite her best efforts. Her throat feels tight and her chest burns from holding back the sobs threatening to break free. Bill's expression hardens. What did he do? He asks, his voice low and protective. Did he hurt you? Jane knows who he's talking about, and the thought of him makes her stomach twist. But she shakes her head. No, Uncle Bill, he didn't hurt me. It was nothing like that. Now Bill sighs, looking conflicted. Look, Jane, he says awkwardly, I know how you feel about him, but you can't keep holding on to the hope that... He pauses, struggling to find the right words. Look, the alpha, Reese, he can't be with you. He's never going to be with you. You understand? Jane nods stiffly, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. Of course he can't be with her. He's still in love with his wife. That truth stings, settling like a heavy weight in her chest. I know, she murmurs, looking away. I'm not good enough. What are you talking about? Bill exclaims, shaking his head. It has nothing to do with being good enough, believe me. Her uncle grunts and looks at her, his expression softening. Frustration bubbled inside her. Darn it, she muttered under her breath. It was hard to explain, but it wouldn't be right for him to mate with Jane. Besides, after everything that had happened here, the fire... He sighed, struggling to find the words. Jane swallowed against the painful lump in her throat, wishing she could help him. Oh, honey, Bill murmured, his expression heavy with sadness. There's nothing you can do. Grieving takes time. He hesitated before adding, and, between losing his brother and Miss Eliza, his brother is dead too. She murmured this as if clutching onto the last fragments of her shattered heart. Bill nodded grimly. We don't talk about him too much. He glanced toward the house. The children, they lost their mother in the fire. The master thought that was more than enough death for them, enough trauma. Marcus was there, Jane pressed gently. During the fire? Bill shook his head as though the words were too difficult to say. Ray's had to get him out. Sophie, too. His voice cracked. By the time he came back for Eliza, it was too late. He couldn't save her. He had to leave her there, not knowing how much she was loved. That's why he can never get over her death. You understand? Jane nodded, though the words barely registered in her mind, clouded as it was with everything that had happened. She nodded, half listening, her thoughts racing. Ray's wasn't himself. He wasn't. She knew that, and she was going to fix it. Jane wasn't sure this was going to work, but she had to try. She drove back to town, the drive feeling like it dragged on forever. Parking Uncle Bill's car in a hurry, she ran to the rundown comic book store, fingers crossed. Please make this work, she silently begged. Pushing the door open, she shut her eyes tightly. When she opened them, she found herself standing in the magician's shop. Barely having time to breathe a sigh of relief, she was greeted by the sight of a young woman with strawberry blonde hair, sending her a death glare. Oh, the girl said, annoyed. It's you. Jane thought she'd met this girl before, but it was all a little blurry. Hi, she tried, giving her a tentative smile. I remember. The blonde interrupted, unimpressed. Iris. Right, Jane smiled again, tentatively. Hello, Iris. She earned an eye roll for her efforts. Then Iris left her spot behind the counter to walk to the bottom of the stairs. Adrian, she called out, your drinking buddy's back. Iris turned back to Jane, giving her an expectant glance that made Jane gulp. I apologize for yesterday, Jane told her nervously. I don't know what She was interrupted by the sound of footsteps announcing the magician's presence. He appeared at the top of the stairs, his hair even messier than the day before. Giving Jane a brief glance, he asked, "Who's this?" pointing at her while shooting Iris a questioning look. The latter looked like she wanted to throttle him. "That's Jane," Iris said, emphasizing the name. "And what does she want?" Adrian blinked. "You should know. You're the one who hung out with her all day yesterday." "I've never seen this person in my life," he replies, sounding shockingly sincere. Jane clears her throat, actually jumping in because, despite her awkwardness, she has no time to waste. "We did meet yesterday. You were drinking by yourself." "Sounds about right," Iris mutters under her breath. "You said you could grant me a wish," Jane insists. Adrian groans dramatically. "Iris," he begins, sounding pitiful. "Could you—" "Nope," the blonde shrugs, stepping away. "I don't care how hungover you are. You're on your own." Jane watches her disappear into the back of the shop, stomping her feet. "Well, thanks a lot," the magician grunts, stepping down the stairs. "She's been angry with me for weeks, and now, thanks to you, she's angry again." Jane blinks in confusion. "What did I do?" "If I know," Adrian shrugs. "Now, about your wish. I remember you said you'd take what I love most in exchange, and that it would probably mean I wouldn't see Reese anymore." Jane cuts in. "Who's Reese?" The magician asks, but Jane ignores him. "But if I don't do something, I'm going to lose him anyway. I'd rather we be apart, knowing he is safe and happy." "It's way too early for all this drama," Adrian sighs, sagging in his chair. It's 1 p.m. Jane notices an annoyed glance directed her way and clears her throat. "My friend Reese is being haunted by a ghost," she begins, summarizing the situation. "The ghost of his dead wife, to be exact. Sometimes this ghost talks to him, and it affects him. He becomes angry, not like himself." She hesitates, recalling how he had fired her just earlier that day. "Maybe he fired you because you were getting wasted here instead of doing your job," Iris's voice cuts in sharply from behind. Adrian straightens in his seat at the sound of her tone. "No," Jane insists, shaking her head. "He wouldn't just fire me for that. We're friends. He cares about me. I know it." Her voice softens as she continues. "All those cruel things he said to me, he'd never have said them if it weren't for the ghost of his wife. She's stuck here, and they can't let go of each other." The magician sighs thoughtfully. "So you wish for this ghost to go away?" Hope flickers in Jane's chest. Could he really do that? She imagines simply wishing Eliza away, but quickly remembers Bill's words about how much Reese adored her. Her mind drifts to Eliza's children, and most of all to Reese himself. Letting Jane stay would feel like a betrayal if she just wished Eliza into oblivion. None of them would get the closure they needed. "I've heard ghosts remain in the land of the living because of unfinished business," Jane says carefully, making the magician raise an eyebrow. "Couldn't I wish for Eliza to find closure instead of just making her disappear? She and Reese really loved each other, but a fire tore them apart. I think she needs to say goodbye." Adrian studies her with a measured look. "If you wish for the ghost to find closure, I will give it exactly what it wants, no matter what." Jane bites her lip, thinking of Bill's confession. Reese chose to save Eliza's children instead of her. He thinks she died believing he didn't love her. But if only she could know how much she is missed. Adrian grimaces slightly. "If knowing this is what she needs, then she will have it," he says firmly. "Should you wish it." Jane clenches her fists, resolve hardening within her. "I do," she says with a decisive nod. The road blurs ahead as Jane drives back from the magician's shop, her mind swirling with emotions. Hope swells in her chest. Finally, Eliza might find peace if the magician's magic works. Reese and his children could be free from the ghost that has haunted them for so long. But alongside that hope comes a deep ache in her heart. The idea of losing Reese cuts through her like a blade. She grips the steering wheel tighter, blinking back tears as memories surface. His rare, warm smiles, moments when his laughter filled the house, the way he looked at her when grief wasn't weighing him down. For the first time, she found something, or someone, worth holding on to, and now she was going to lose it all. But this was for the best. Eliza needed closure, and Reese deserved to move on, to be happy without the weight of guilt and pain. He needed to be free of the ghosts clinging to him, poisoning his mind and heart. Still, it hurt. Wiping a tear from her cheek, Jane lets her thoughts drift once more. Magician's words echo in Eliza's mind. Once she finds her peace, he will take what Jane loves most. Her hands tremble on the wheel, and she knows exactly what that means. The moment Eliza is free, Jane will be torn away from Ray, from the children, from the life she's only just begun to imagine for herself. The thought of not being able to say goodbye, of never seeing him again, claws at her chest. "Maybe I still have time," she whispers, her voice hoarse. "I can at least say goodbye." The forest surrounding Ray's estate appears on the horizon, towering trees casting long shadows in the fading light. Her heart beats faster, pounding painfully in her chest. She wants, no, needs to see him one last time, to see his face, his smile, before it's too late. Maybe even tell him how she feels, just once. But as she nears the estate, something strange catches her eye. Smoke. Her heart lurches. A thick plume of black smoke rises over the tree line, curling against the dusky sky like a dark omen. Panic surges through her veins. No, it can't be. She slams her foot on the gas, the car lurching forward as the engine roars. Her heart races, dread clawing its way up her throat. The smoke grows thicker the closer she gets, and as she rounds the last bend, the full horror comes into view. The house, Ray's home, is engulfed in flames. Ray blinks, his vision hazy and unfocused. The world around him blurs in and out of existence. Everything feels distant and surreal, as though he's trapped in a dream. His mind is slow and sluggish, thoughts moving like molasses, barely registering. The heat presses down on him, suffocating, and his lungs burn with every shallow breath. Smoke fills them, and he coughs weakly. He's so tired, so heavy. He can't move. The crackling of the fire surrounds him, roaring in his ears, but distant, muffled, like the sound of a storm far off on the horizon. He tries to lift his arm, but it feels like lead, useless and limp at his side. His body refuses to respond. His limbs are too heavy to lift. "We can be together forever now." The voice is soft, sweet, and familiar, yet it drifts through his mind like a whisper, slipping through his fingers before he can grasp it. He knows this voice, doesn't he? It feels like something from long ago, a memory buried deep, hidden beneath layers of time and guilt. His eyelids flutter, struggling to stay open as his head lolls to the side. The flames dance around him, flickering shadows against the walls, but they seem far away, like they belong to another world. Is this real, or is it a dream? A face hovers above him, known and beloved. Long dark hair frames clear blue eyes. "Ellie," Ray murmurs, confused. It must be a dream. Eliza is dead. She died in the fire. But hadn't the fire been put out? Why is there still smoke? Why can he see flames burning on the edge of his vision? You left me, Eliza's voice whispers against his ear. I'm sorry, Ray chokes out, but the words get trapped in his throat and he coughs. I had to get the children to safety. We were supposed to be together forever, Eliza accuses, her tone laced with sorrow. Why didn't you stay? Why did you take our children away? Ray, he closes his eyes, recalling the heaviness that had weighed him down, a slowness, a dull ache. A candle flickered in her hand as she stood before him. I can't take this anymore, she'd said. Even near you, I feel like we're apart. Cliff, it hurts. My entire soul hurts. Then she'd taken the candle to the curtains, to the carpet. He lit that fire. Reese rasps at the memory, reliving it all. The way Eliza's dead-eyed stare haunted him, so distant from the vibrant woman he'd once known. Her apathy, her disinterest. She wouldn't even hold their children. Only their cries had stirred Reese awake on that day, the day Eliza decided to end it all. Did you drug me, Ellie? He asks now, perhaps to her or perhaps to the void itself. Is she even here? But then a voice echoes back, distorted and spectral. Stop calling me that, it wails, plaintive and sorrowful. You never call me Ellie. Reese calls me Ellie, not you. Reese shuts his eyes again, the familiar urge to confess bubbling within him. Had he made a mistake lying to her? He'd only been trying to keep her alive, worried about the baby. We'll be together soon, Eliza repeats. Jane screams, her voice cracking as she pulls the car to a halt. She throws open the door and stumbles out, her eyes wide with disbelief. The fire rages, consuming the grand mansion in an inferno of orange and red. Flames hungrily devour the walls while black smoke billows into the sky. For a moment, her body goes numb. This can't be real. But the deafening roar of the fire and the choking scent of smoke fill her lungs, snapping her back to reality. Her heart pounds wildly, panic claws at her chest. Without thinking, her legs carry her forward, racing toward the burning house. Her breath comes in ragged gasps. "Reese!" she screams, her voice hoarse. "Marcus!" "Sophie!" No answer, just the unrelenting roar of the flames consuming everything. "Please," she sobs, stumbling ahead. She has to find them. She has to save them. She rounds the side of the house where the fire hasn't yet spread as violently, though the smoke is thick, choking her lungs. She coughs, her throat raw, pushing through the haze until she catches sight of movement. A figure hunched over near the edge of the woods. "Reese," she calls, her voice breaking. As she gets closer, the figure turns, and her heart shatters. Standing there alone, tears streaming down his soot-streaked face, his small body trembling, is Marcus. Jane rushes to him, grabbing his shoulders. Her voice shakes. "Where's your father? Where's Sophie?" Marcus sniffles, his voice barely audible. "Sophie? Sophie left with Uncle Bill and Miss Teal earlier." He shrugs helplessly. Jane's blood runs cold. Reese is still inside. "No," she whispers, her stomach twisting in terror. She looks back at the inferno, the flames raging higher, devouring everything. Without hesitation, she starts toward the house again, but Marcus grabs her arm. His grip is surprisingly strong for such a small child. "Don't go," he pleads, his voice a broken whisper. Tears stream down her face as she turns to him, torn between fear and duty. Her heart breaking, she crouches down and pulls Marcus into her arms. He speaks again, his voice trembling. "She told me if I helped her light another fire, then she'd leave," he whispers, making Jane freeze. I didn't want to, he continues, his voice cracking. But she kept asking, and she sounded so sad. I just wanted it to stop. Bile rises in Jane's throat as realization dawns. She's been a fool. All this time, she'd been so focused on Reese that she hadn't considered Eliza might influence someone else in the house. It's not your fault, Jane whispers, trying to reassure him. She just wants to be with him again, Marcus says, gripping her arm tightly. She says they're fated mates, that they can't be apart. Jane shakes her head, confusion clouding her mind. She has no idea what that means, but it doesn't sound good. I don't want the alpha to die, Marcus sobs. She made him drink something, and now he won't wake up. The fire crackles loudly, its snapping sound overwhelming. Jane struggles to breathe, torn between love and fear. She knows she has to act. Marcus, listen to me, she orders firmly. I'm going to find your father. You go and stay outside. Don't come back no matter what. Marcus shakes his head, protesting. Jane, you don't understand, he cries. Reese isn't my father. He pretends to be for Sophie, I think, but he's not. What are you talking about? Jane gasps, her head spinning in disbelief. Reese is my uncle, Marcus explains. My real father is dead. Reese sits alone, consumed by thoughts of death. He feels his time is near, and perhaps it's for the best. He's cheated death for too long. Years have passed already. Now his time has come. He wishes he died sooner, wishes he hadn't traded places with Cliff that day. It had been their habit since childhood, trading roles for fun, because no one could tell them apart, not by sight at least. Cliff and Reese were identical, even to those closest to them. For years, no one noticed the switch, not even through their heightened senses. Cliff and Reese shared everything, except one thing. Reese's best friend, Eliza, another shiver from the pack. Eliza and Cliff couldn't stand each other, always fighting whenever they were in the same room. To Reese, it didn't make sense how the two people he loved most couldn't get along. But when they grew older, it all became clear. They were mates. Reese was overjoyed when Cliff and Eliza found each other, especially when their son, Marcus, was born. Yet there was resentment lingering beneath the surface. While Cliff had Eliza, a family, and a bond, Reese only had the burden of being alpha, a role he never truly wanted. Cliff knew this, always saying that if Reese were chosen as alpha, they'd switch places, and Cliff would take on the role instead. Cliff was the confident twin, not Reese. But when it came down to it, Cliff told Reese he couldn't abandon his responsibilities. It was too dangerous. He wouldn't risk being separated from his mate. He swore, though, that when Reese needed a break, they would switch temporarily. And that's what they did the day of the attack. It was supposed to be a simple meeting with a neighboring pack. Cliff offered to go instead of Reese, who desperately needed time off. He'd been courting a girl, wanting time with her, a mate of his own. So Cliff went, and he never returned. Reese was left to give Eliza the news. He couldn't bear to look her in the eye. She looked like she already knew. She must have, for without Cliff, her soul had split into two. When Reese found her, she was haggard, barely human. But when their eyes met, she smiled briefly, asking him to come closer. Then she kissed him and called him Cliff. That is how years of horrified silence began. Eliza was pregnant at the time, and the healers worried she wouldn't make it. She might lose the baby or, worse, die along with it. The only times color returned to her cheeks were when Reese visited, making her ask him to pretend, to act like his dead brother. So Reese did, until he wasn't even sure Eliza was pretending anymore. Sophie was born, and 2 years passed, though Eliza never got better. One night, he woke to a house in flames, the children screaming for him. Now the house is burning again, but Reese knows his children are safe. He made Ellie swear she wouldn't take them in return for him paying his debt. If she wants him dead for having his brother killed in his stead, then so be it. Reese just wished he could have seen his small human one last time. Jane races through the flames, her lungs burning. Every step feels like it's dragging her deeper into the fire. The heat sears her skin, sweat dripping down her back. The house is crumbling around her, beams collapsing, walls falling away, but she keeps going. Marcus's words echo in her mind. She pushes through the thick smoke, her vision blurry, her throat raw from the fumes. She has to get to him. She has to save him. The stairs ahead are in ruins, wood and debris blocking the path, flames licking at the edges of what's left. Reese! Her voice cracks, barely audible over the roaring fire. She coughs, her body trembling from the effort. Is this what her wish amounted to? Eliza finding closure through the flames? Through killing Reese? Through the inferno? A massive shadow moves. Jane freezes, her breath catching in her throat. An enormous wolf, larger than any she's ever seen, emerges from the flames. Its eyes gleam in the flickering light, its gaze fixed on her with an intensity that makes her heart stutter. There's something familiar about it, something she can't quite place, but it doesn't matter. She has no other choice. Jane doesn't hesitate. She scrambles onto the wolf's back, clinging to its fur as it leaps forward, effortlessly clearing the debris blocking the staircase. Her grip tightens as the wolf bounds up the crumbling stairs, each leap sending her heart racing. They reach the top in what feels like mere seconds, the tower looming ahead. Then she sees Reese, lying unconscious on the ground, his body limp, his skin pale against the flickering firelight. But he isn't alone. Standing beside him, its figure glowing in the eerie light, is Eliza's ghost. Its eyes are locked on Reese, its face twisted with sorrow and longing. Jane's blood runs cold. "Eliza, stop!" Jane screams, her voice hoarse and frantic. "That's not Cliff. He's gone. He's dead." The ghost looks up, and Jane's heart clenches. This woman, this tortured soul, has been trapped here for years, unable to move on, unable to let go because she didn't think she could. "Eliza," Jane pleads, stepping forward, "your mate is gone. You can join him now. You can rest." The ghost's form wavers, her face crumpling as she turns to the wolf. The giant creature steps forward from the shadows. The wolf's eyes meet hers, and something passes between them, a silent understanding. Tears stream down Eliza's face as she reaches out, wrapping her arms around the wolf's neck, clinging to it as if her very existence depended on it. And then, just like that, they're gone. The ghost vanishes, disappearing into the flames, and the wolf melts into the shadows, leaving nothing but a hollow silence in their wake. Jane rushes to Reese's side, her hands trembling as she touches his face. His skin is too cold, too still. "Reese," she whispers, her voice breaking, "please wake up." For a moment, nothing happens. The fire crackles around them, the heat oppressive, but Reese doesn't move. "Please," she sobs, her voice barely a whisper, "don't leave me." And then, slowly, his eyes flutter open. A weak smile tugs at his lips as he looks up at her, his voice soft and strained. "Jane." Relief crashes over her, and she pulls him into her arms, holding him tightly, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and joy. "I love you," Reese murmurs, his words slurred, but Jane hears them clear as day. Her chest tightens, the weight of everything they've been through crashing down on her. When she pulls away, she's no longer holding Reese. In his place is a massive wolf, nearly identical to the one that carried her through the flames. Its amber eyes stare into hers, full of warmth and understanding. Jane's breath catches in her throat. With a gentle nudge, the wolf lowers itself, and without hesitation, Jane climbs onto its back. The beast leaps through the shattered window, soaring through the flames, carrying her away from the destruction below. The wind rushes around them, and for the first time in what feels like forever, Jane feels free. Bill pushes open the door to the comic store, his heart pounding in his chest. He half expects the neon-lit mess Jane had described to be a figment of her imagination, but as he steps inside, the world shifts. The bright lights and garish posters fade, and he finds himself standing in an old, dusty bookstore instead, the air thick with the scent of old paper. Bill turns to find a young woman with strawberry blonde hair sitting behind a counter, flipping through a magazine with a bored expression. Her eyes don't even lift from the pages as she acknowledges his presence. "You must be Iris," Bill says, clearing his throat, trying to shake off the unnerving shift in atmosphere. The girl shrugs, barely impressed by his deduction. She tosses the magazine aside and swings her legs off the counter. "Suppose I should go find the boss for you," she says, not waiting for a reply before disappearing into the back, leaving Bill to stand awkwardly amidst the dust and silence. Moments later, she returns, followed by a tall man with messy dark hair and an unsettling presence. There's something off about him, something that has Bill's wolf stirring uneasily inside him. The aura around Adrian is thick, almost palpable, and Bill has to swallow down the instinct to turn and leave. But he can't, not yet. Jane said this man could be trusted, and Bill is desperate. Adrian sits down across from Bill, his sharp eyes studying him. "I suppose you have a wish to make," he says casually, like they're discussing the weather. "Well, you see," Bill hesitates, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've heard about you from Jane." At the mention of her name, Adrian raises a brow. "If you've come to get her wish and old, you're wasting your time. I can't undo wishes. Once I take something, it's gone until the day I die," Iris pipes in, her tone deadpan. "And he's immortal." Bill shakes his head, feeling the weight of his words before they even leave his mouth. "That's not why I'm here." Adrian looks mildly surprised. "No? Though not sure your wish-granting was very useful," Bill complains. "Eliza's ghost started a fire and ow!" Iris interrupts, but Adrian cuts her off. "Excuse me, Iris." He gives her a private smile while his assistant continues to scowl at Bill. The latter, feeling chastised, hesitates. "Jane told me that what she lost in exchange for her wish was her ability to see ghosts." Adrian leans back, crossing his arms. "It's what she loved most because it let her help the people she loves, and she was quite desperate to help someone." "You're Alpha, I'm guessing?" Bill nods slowly, clearing his throat. "About that, I know Jane is in love with him, and I know he loves her too, but Jane is human, and being with a shifter is dangerous for her. Her future with them, Reese and the children, is uncertain." Adrian's eyes narrow, his expression hardening. "Right, she could get bitten and die, or she could get pregnant and die. Shifters don't really mix well with humans." Bill's stomach clenches with worry, but also with the quiet rage that's been simmering inside him for years. She knows the risks, but she won't hear of it. She's determined to stay with Reese and the kids. Adrian raises a brow, his tone sharp. Right. So what is it you wish for, Bill? To keep them apart? The hardness in his voice makes Bill pause, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Adrian's voice makes Bill bristle, but he quickly shakes his head. No, I don't want to keep them apart. I love Jane. I want her to be happy. He pauses, swallowing hard, his voice faltering as he begins to confess a secret he's kept hidden for decades. When I was younger, about 30 years ago, I fell in love with a human woman, a married woman. She wanted to leave her life behind for me, but I knew we couldn't be together. It was too dangerous for her, so I let her go. Adrian listens in silence, his gaze unreadable. Bill continues, his voice raw. She was pregnant. I didn't know at the time, but she wrote to me later after she found out. I was terrified the baby might be mine. I found her, and thankfully, the child, Jane, was human. But her mother, she still died during childbirth. Bill's hands tremble, guilt that has haunted him for years evident in every movement. I told her husband I was a distant relative and said he could contact me if he ever needed help. But when social services eventually reached out to me after her father passed, I said I couldn't take her in. She was human. I told myself she couldn't be part of my world, but the truth is, I was a coward. Iris is silent, her usual sarcasm gone. Bill's voice softens. But no more. I owe Jane her happiness, and so I wish for her to become a shifter, to fully and safely be with Reese. Adrian leans forward, studying Bill carefully. There's something dark in his eyes, something dangerous. That's quite noble of you, Bill, but you know what it'll cost you. You'll lose what you love most. Bill's heart pounds in his chest, but he meets Adrian's gaze without flinching. I'm growing old. I've got nothing left to lose, nothing worth more than Jane's happiness. Adrian's dark eyes flicker, and for a moment, Bill thinks he sees a trace of something, respect, maybe, in the magician's expression. Very well, he says, his voice low and quiet. Jane stands at the edge of the field, watching from a distance as Reese and the children come to stand before the grave. The wide, flowery plains stretch endlessly around them, bathed in the soft, golden light of dusk. There is no ghost lingering in the peaceful landscape, no shadow or chill to disrupt the moment. Only the soft summer breeze whispers through the grass, rippling the sea of vibrant wildflowers like a gentle sigh. Everything feels alive, vivid, and full of hope, as if the world itself is breathing in the promise of new beginnings. Jane smiles, her heart full. Reese's voice carries through the field, deep and filled with emotion. He hugs the children close, his silhouette strong against the warm glow of the setting sun. This was your father, Cliff Hawthorne. He was a good man, and my brother. Jane can hear him clearly. Her heightened senses catch every word. Her hearing isn't the only thing that's changed. She has become one of them, a shifter with all the strength and instincts that come with it. But more importantly, she has gained a family. She hears Sophie's small voice next, her question filled with innocent curiosity. Was Cliff my mom's mate? Reese's response is steady, laced with warmth. Yes, sweetheart, he was. The reply is heavy with emotion. Yes, she loved him very much. She loved you both, too. And your dad loved you more than anything. Marcus is quiet for a moment, his eyes thoughtful as he stares at the grave. The light catches in his golden hair, and eventually he nods. "You're our dad," he says softly, turning to take Reese's hand. Jane's smile widens, her chest warm with love and peace as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting long golden rays across the field. Reese and the children turn and start to walk back toward her. Thank you for watching. You'll find links to more stories on your screen. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you could help me out by giving it a like or comment. Thank you so much to everyone who's done so on my other stories. You guys are all stars.